No one knew that by opening a door, Randy Wu would challenge not only the logic of a game, but also the very fabric of reality itself. When he plunges into a new world full of dangers, the adrenaline of the player transforms into pure survival upon realizing that death in this scenario would cause him to cease existing in real life. My brother, the pressure is mounting and he needs to act fast, but trapped by a lack of resources and a hostile environment, how will he find a way to save himself? The unexpected unfolds as sinister forces swirl around him. What will be the next step? The next move of Randy, the relentless warrior. Hi, I'm Shin. Did anyone miss me? Yeah, by the lack of response, I guess not. So, without further ado, let's get to the video. In the midst of the demon castle, the Demon King's guards were sleeping so deeply that they were practically corpses. And in this sinister setting, our dear Randy Wu spots his target, throwing a mischievous smile at the Demon King. For, after taking this guy out, his life was about to change and the money was going to roll in. But at the exact moment he prepares to deliver the final blow, an irritating notification appears. You are being disconnected from the server, buddy. Seeing his chance, the Demon Wurzburg swooped in and cut the hero in half. My brother, in reality, in the outside world, at Randy Wu's house, the trouble was brewing. Some goons were smashing everything and yanking the internet cable directly from his virtual reality pot. When Randy Wu woke up, he was a hurricane of rage. Buddy, he grabs the guys by the collar and says, "So, you ready to die, you motherfucker?" The goons, terrified, started begging him to relax and said they were just trying to help him get out of that gaming vibe. You know how it is, right? Randy had worked with these guys in the past, he was the problem solver for the boys, and like, I'm not talking about any petty little problems, you know? He was a beast at school, but he also got carried away with his spending. And yes, the goons were right, but he still didn't think twice before giving them a good beating. It was a fact that he spent all the cash on the new virtual reality capsule. Now he was addicted to a game, and that game was called Humanity's Savior. In this game, the battles are so real that it's almost as if you were really there. A masterpiece of flesh and bone. And it's not just magic and brawling. You can gain fame, make new connections, and even discover what a VR podium is. Even the most common fighters can become kings. That's why Randall took out a loan of about 1,000,000,000 won, Korean currency, from the loan sharks, all to buy this dream machine. But now, they had broken into his apartment and prevented him from getting the money that would make his problems disappear. Yes, he was going to get his revenge. One of the goons had the audacity to say, "Hey, we're the debt collectors here." "Hold on, brother. You're messing with the loan sharks." He simply stared at the guy, looking firm. "Go ahead, man. I would love to see you try." Randall promised that one day he would pay, but he checked his bank account and damn, my friend, he was more broke than the hopes of people who believe in politicians. The goons proposed that he return to being their problem solver, but Randall just looked at his dream machine and the memories of the game started flooding back into his head. He couldn't let that chance slip away. No, not without beating around the bush. He told the guys to disappear, that he would pay up soon. Now he needed to finish the mission he was facing. He logged back into the game and appeared in the main city, but there was something going on. A penalty. You know how it is, right? For dying in battle, he was under a suspended death penalty for about 22 hours. Frustrated, Andy wondered how he was going to make money now. Then someone approached and said, "Dude, you look like you're having a bit of trouble." A girl introducing herself as Aquila. The great master of the game-saving humanity, Aquila, was dumbfounded, unable to believe that the kid could be the savior of the game. But Aquila dropped the hint. "Don't judge a book by its cover, kid." But Randy stood firm. He couldn't trust empty words. Then Aquila simply snapped her fingers and time froze around them. His mind exploded. "My brother, what the hell is this?" This was an absurd ability to stop time, level SSS. But she adjusted what had, in reality, only knocked out the server. Ah, she's a GM, right? That clarifies whether it was enough for him to believe her words or not. Then she mentioned she had news for the 7th birthday of the game, and before he could process it, the system sent out a notification. A new game world had been opened. She said he should be the first to explore it. Randy, my skeptical brother, replied that he still had unfinished business with his current character. You know how it is, right? However, she insisted on revealing that the reward would be a mere 25 million. Are you kidding me? Look at this reward, my brother. She noticed that he was afraid to face the challenge and winked at him. Randy was shocked because, dang, that was quite the incentive, right? No. Besides that, Aquila knew about his quest for the true ending. She then revealed that there would be an item containing clues for him to reach the end of the game. Randy was completely hypnotized by the offer, thinking about what it could be. Aquila said that if he tried now, he would earn a bonus from the system, and, as if that weren't enough, he checked and saw 30 million won dropping into his account. Man, this woman is rich. Now she made it clear that he was her VIP and that she was sponsoring his adventure. The protagonist realized that even if he didn't complete the mission, it would be worth it after all. It would cover all his interest. He couldn't refuse that offer, right? No. Would you refuse? I wouldn't. couldn't. After all, missing out on this was out of the question. Aquila confirmed that this was what she expected. And she went to work to send him to the new map, and in the process, she began to modify the game's programming like a goddess. As the expansion started to be installed, the game's landscape was changing. Soon, they were alone in front of a door. She explained that by crossing it, Randy would be in the new world. The guy realized he just needed to go through the door, but before that, he told Aquila not to forget the reward she promised. With that, he takes a step towards the true ending. Aquila doesn't waste time and drops a bomb. If Randy dies in this new world, the consequence is very real. He kicks the bucket in real life too. The dude simply froze with this information, but there was no way to turn back, right? He had already crossed the line of the door. As soon as he falls face first on the ground, the pain hits like a punch, my brother. And he's thinking, what the hell is this, my son? Is this a game or what? Damn! Now with the pain, it dawns on him, remembering Aquila and realizing she was not kidding. It was all very real. So the guy figured he had to risk everything to win and survive, but you know he's pissed at Aquila for that play, right? My brother, starting from scratch, Randy has nothing, not even water to drink. You get it? He walks very slowly through the empty forest, blaming everything on Aquila. When he checks his stats, the guy realizes it's a complete joke, almost lifeless. Look at this. And to make matters worse, he's in a drought. He's walked 12 consecutive hours, and his throat feels like the Sahara. What to do to win this game is becoming a much harder mission than he thought. Out of nowhere, he hears water nearby and, without thinking twice, starts running towards the sound. By some bizarre luck, he trips over a stream and thinks, look, a spring in paradise. This is more like a Biggles adventure. At this point, the guy doesn't even care about the urge to hate Aquila. He just wants to wet his throat. That's for sure. Closer to the water, he comes face to face with a woman bathing. The way she leaves him speechless, if you know what I mean. The dude stands there, mouth agape. There's no way to disguise all the admiration for her beauty. He's there, appreciating it, but when he decides to approach, his system alerts him that he needs money to buy the DLC. Randy is pissed, thinking that a VIP like him should have full access to the new map. Suddenly, a bunch of other women appears saying there's a payment to see what comes next, completely drooling. He asks how much this whole nonsense costs, but within seconds, the guys grab him and capture him. After being captured, a witch calls him a pervert and tells him not to move, and to top it off implies that if he behaves, he can keep his own clothes. Andy, still thinking about the DLC he hasn't purchased, asks again how much it is. Then the other guy, also trapped, looks at him, extremely confused, and asks what this weirdo is talking about. This guy's name is Rude, a monster hunter. Our boy introduces himself as Velote Ted Valor and asks how this hunter ended up here. Rude explains that it was all pure luck. Or was it? He was near the witch's forest, hunting his prey. After that, he asks if Velote Ted got himself into trouble too, and Randy just confirms. The hunter laments the situation, saying Velote Ted looks pretty young, but the boy assures him he's fine, since escaping is his thing. He even takes a stroll and boasts that he has a well-thought-out escape plan. Then, Randy remembers that he was the one who wrote the guide on how to defeat those witches. It took him 3 days to, gather everything, and he described the 5 witches: Revel, Gunda, Kaldura, Aldaida, and Fuxel. The witches are like initial bosses that players have to face, but many people have already paid a high price for it. But if you look closely, they're a messy bunch, right? Randy knows that to escape, he has to exploit this weakness. Then, the guy turns to Lady Fruxhell and comments, "It's curious that you're still breathing." He remembers hearing Lady of Reiju saying she was going to send her to the beyond. Fuxel gets upset about this, and she quickly starts pointing her finger at the partnership, which is exactly what the protagonist expected. And so, he stirs the situation by saying that Rejuju planned to eliminate Fuxel to take everything for herself. Is that true, Fuxel? She starts to roar, furious. Rejuju responds that the little friend shouldn't trust a prisoner's talk, right? She even adds that Fuxulos wouldn't be able to handle all the money they recently acquired, so she's wanting a cut. In the end, the girl always has her eye on her friend's assets. Udaida never gets the idea. Let it go. Wanna know? Juju is making an acidic bomb, that's for sure. Meanwhile, Gunda, with an insatiable hunger, asks when the food will be ready. Hey, Kaldura, who loves to stir things up, screams if a fight is about to happen. My brother, count me in. Then, in the blink of an eye, the brawl begins. The protagonist just watches, laughing inside. His plan is working out. He understands that even being a team, the witches fight among themselves as if there were no tomorrow. Many people can't get past these witches by ignoring this crucial detail. But with this valuable information in hand, Randall has a certain advantage. So, in the midst of this commotion, he says to Rude, "This is my perfect chance for us to bail." But before leaving, he wants to have a little fun with the witches. So Randy basically drags them and throws all the witches into a cauldron. After causing Causing a ruckus and tossing the witches into the cauldron, Randy nudged Rude to show him the way out. But dude, this guy wasn't leaving without giving them a beating, right? You know how it goes, right? Even if they are a bit foolish, they provide a pretty cool experience. But just when he thought he would escape smoothly, a fire snake clamped onto his leg. One of the witches, with all her cynicism, shouted that she was going to take Randall with her to the sack. The problem was he had forgotten that his character was a bit weaker than it should have been. So, it wouldn't be that easy, but, Rude didn't take long and came running to help. He armed himself quickly and cut the snake with a swift strike. "Thanks for the support," Randy said, getting up right afterward. He asked to borrow Rude's bow. Rude, somewhat suspicious, questioned whether he knew how to use that thing, and the guy simply replied, "Oh, it's fine, I'll manage." Would you believe the guy went there and shot an arrow hitting a jar that was hanging? As it shattered, the jar spilled a filthy liquid over the fuses. Right then, Rude could only sigh and said, "Uh-oh, this isn't going to end well." That jar had acid, and mixing it with the high chair could only lead to an explosion. The witches watched the scene, completely frozen, unable to do anything, and in the next instant, a colossal explosion erupted in their hideout. But Andu and Rude managed to escape in time. The former asked if that had really eliminated those witches. Randall checked his system and confirmed, assuring him he thought he had gotten incredibly lucky, especially with such a low level. Rude admitted that he had lost all hope, but thanked Randall for saving his skin. Then, as a form of gratitude, he decided to give a gift to our boy. Randall received some red dragon fruit cufflinks and was ecstatic. He couldn't remember anything like that before in his adventures. Rudy explained that they looked valuable, so he had stolen them from the witches. He acted without a second thought, grabbed all those jewels and sent them away. And then, the system chimed in. The Beth news now made him a dragon bone with insane power. His stats shot up and soared. No ordinary player would dream of getting something like that right off the bat. Randy thought his luck was finally turning. In a way, Randall saw potential in the kid and invited him to be a hunter as well. Thus, in that instant, Randall's system sent a notification. He had now unlocked a friendship route with a monster hunter. Although he appreciated the invitation, he politely declined, saying he had other plans. Rude remarked that he seemed like a busy type, but Randy Wu, thinking it over, saw it as an opportunity. His character lacked class, and all that crazy experience would fade away if he didn't use it, so he decided he would try to become a hunter. He asked if 3 months would be enough. Rudy simply gave a definitive no, stating that it would take at least about 3 years. After a 10 exchange, Rudy took Randy Wu to the forest and told him to hide wherever he wanted. The hunter began to say that the protagonist had 30 minutes before he started looking. Randy realized that the hunter had a tracking ability, but thought Rudy was underestimating him, thinking he was just an ordinary prey. After all, he had explored those trees several times. He remembered absolutely everything, even the secret hiding spots, and he also knew that the trees there completely distorted anyone's vision, not to mention that there were poisonous mushroom spores scattered everywhere. Besides, there were beasts far fiercer than those witches. Randall had already butted heads with their Maria, and with his new powers, his abilities were almost maxed out. With all this in mind, he thought the hunter wouldn't find him easily, but soon he realized he had underestimated the play. Rudy found him quickly. The rude guy looked at our boy and said, "Let's step it up." But then he added, "For your grit, I'll give you 10 bonus points. By the way, you asked how I found you so fast, right?" Rudy said it had been a while since he encountered such an interesting student. He told Randy to push himself a bit more. From now on, the protagonist's system then alerted that the initiation mission of the hunter had been completed, and a new mission, Hunter's Trial, had begun. After some time as a hunter, Randy Wu and Rudy learned many new skills. He realized that teaming up with Rudy wasn't a bad idea. 3 months passed, and he had already learned a lot at the camp. Then, Rudy asked if the guy had absorbed everything he had taught. Randy gave it to him straight. And if the hunter didn't believe in him, he was more than welcome to hide wherever he wanted in that forest. Rod was now impressed by the kid's spirit, so he began to say that he always surprised him. He decided to follow Randall's suggestion, but not before adding, "If I don't find you in an hour, you'll have to cook for me at dinner." And Andy accepted the challenge with enthusiasm, which was a joy to see. The guy was already hyped to see what was going to happen. A while later, Rod hid and began to think that he had finally found an apprentice with incredible talent, but he also realized he didn't want to complicate things too much. The hunter believed that by hiding on a cliff for an hour, Randy Wu would have difficulty spotting him. However, while he was climbing the mountain, the tricky Randy Wu grabbed Rod's leg, nearly giving the guy a heart attack. Man, after that, Rod tried every way to stay out of sight among the trees, but he was found very quickly. The kid tried to hide in various places, but it was as if he had a sign. "Hi, I found myself here." Soon he wondered how someone could pick up all these techniques that Rod himself took 5 years to master in just about 3 months. This is absurd. So Rod decided to get clever and hide in a cave, right? Thinking that here was the last frontier of his strategy, sketchy, he thought it would be impossible to be discovered in this place known as the abode of the Hellhound. But of course, even there, Randy Wu played ninja and surprised Rod once again. Tip number 1, guardian of humanity. He was now saying that not even earthquakes can wake the Hellhound that is peacefully sleeping. Then, with that, he asked his master if he passed the test. Rod, still in disbelief, stunned by what was happening, replied, "Ah, all right, of course you passed." Outside the cave, Randy admitted he didn't expect such rapid progress, and, in his full humility, said he owed all his skill to his master, right? But in reality, Randy knew that the help from his system had been quite a burden for him to manage, so he decided to let Rod believe that all the glory was his. Anyway, Rod didn't hold back on the compliments, claiming that it wasn't just Randy Wu who was talented, but that his memory was also relentless. Surreal. He also admitted that he had never encountered someone so fierce, thinking that the kid had a bright future ahead. Now that the training had come to an end, Rod was wondering if Randy was still on the task he had mentioned. Randy replied that he would rather make some money first and then pursue his mission. Roger then mentioned that he had a buddy who was a mercenary, and asked if Randy wanted to join him. And, that offer sounded good to Randy, right? It was a great chance to start making some decent cash. Moreover, he would be able to go in easily and still have a flexible schedule. If he was a bit luckier, he would even run into some guardians of the game. So, with that, he decided to accept the offer. Rod then handed a mercenary badge to Randy Wu, assuring that his friend would accept it without hesitation. The hunter said goodbye and wished him luck on his new journey. Randy thought that taking down the witches and gaining a new class was a very cool start for the game. Honestly, a happy ending didn't seem so far-fetched. Without a doubt, Randy's true objective was to leave a like on this video, guys. Just kidding. But come on, the real goal for this guy was to discover the real ending of the game, right? He remembered why he had accepted Akra's proposal, which promised to give him the clues about this conclusion. Furthermore, Randy thought that the whole not knowing when he would kick the bucket was the true thrill of the whole thing. That's why he wanted to make the most of this vibe. But hey, he was really anxious to meet Akila and find out the truth about the ending of this game. Speaking of which, Akila watched from afar, thoroughly entertained, seeing how our boy was doing, and then she noticed that choosing Randy as her VIP piece was a good call. It was a great move. Fantastic. In this atmosphere, a woman commented that Randy was definitely not just any guy. Aquila jokingly asked if her friend was interested in the boy. Valfuga replied that, as a goddess, there was no reason to look at a human that way, right? Valfuga frowned, thinking that Aquila had to protect in a way. And Aquila was like, "But why? I think he's cute." She even made an observation about Valfuga. She seemed more serious lately, remembering that just days before, she was much nicer. Valfuga remarked that this was in a very distant past. Then she started to change the subject and mentioned that Nandio had really paid off his debt. Aquila confirmed that he had. And then, Valfuga asked a question. So why doesn't the boy know that his debt is already paid, right? He still believes he is paying his debt. Aquila responded that watching this guy play so intensely was fun, wasn't it? Valfuga said that Aquila was a bit cruel for doing that. Then came the million-dollar question. Is Randy part of a bigger plan, or is this guy just a toy for you? Aclara stated that Randy was more than just a talent she wanted to keep an eye on. So going back to our fight, Randy brought up the idea of sitting down to relax. Not because his legs were on fire, he was asking for a break. He remarked that that forest was a carnival of excitement. This guy was so tired he dreamed of sleeping for 12 straight hours, but he knew he couldn't do that, right? He couldn't stop there. The mercenary guild was right ahead. Upon arriving in Frankfurt, he entered the Franca Tavern. The waitresses greeted him warmly. Randy shared that he was looking for someone, and one of the waitresses offered to set up a table for him. As soon as our boy settled in, it hit him. That tavern was the perfect place to schmooze or strike up a conversation. He was thinking about getting some information and filling his belly with food and drink. He knew that people talked more easily when they were happy. So the environment was perfect for learning more about the mercenary guild. Being among us, those waitresses were quite charming, right? A great listener. Randall asked if they knew anyone named Rebecaltes. The moment he mentioned the name, the atmosphere of the place changed completely. One of the waitresses, scared, said the name shouldn't be spoken there. Another girl quickly added that the man was incredibly dangerous and, shockingly, her boyfriend. She told that she got involved with Rebecaltes and returned like a mummy, and it wasn't just her who got entangled with this person who met the same fate. But what kind of trouble had our Rude gotten into? The waitress, super worried, insisted that he flee while he had the chance, warning that danger could appear at any moment. But in trying to protect Randall, she ended up pushing him right into the eye of the storm. Coincidentally, Rebecaltes spotted him. Upon seeing Rude's emblem, he immediately exclaimed, "You must be that guy I've heard about! Look at this!" and continued saying that the timing couldn't be more perfect because he was looking for a new partner. Randall realized right away that he was walking into a trap. The only thing leaving this guy in doubt was why Rude had had led him into such a pitfall. After a quick chat with Rebecaltis, Randil understood he was about to be dragged into a war between the Elector Prince and the forces of Paishamute. But he wasn't stupid, so he figured he was being smuggled as a, slave to that army. However, instead of running, he saw a golden opportunity, that of striking the blow, right? The Elector Prince was a games expert, one of Paltese's electors, and he thought he could gather information about other specialists. Soon after, a trumpet blared. "Now is the right time," exclaimed Ebbs. Finally, the prince had arrived. As the cavalry passed by, Rebecaltis commented that Randil would fit in perfectly with them. But Randil felt completely disconnected, thinking the prince had a villain vibe. And guess what? The biggest bombshell was yet to come. When he saw that the very law of Valpergos, he was glued to the prince. The prince glanced at her and asked if something was wrong since she seemed pensive. Valpergos replied that everything was fine, and then they headed to the battlefield. Valpergos had her fighting partner in previous matches, and she regretted not being able to save them in critical moments. Every time he faltered, she ended up getting the short end of the stick. Noticing her mood, Rebs asked if something was bothering this guy. Randy said everything was cool, but mentally promised that this time, even if he had to risk it all, he would make sure Valpergo came out alive. After a while, they arrived at the training ground, watching everyone. Randy thought things were insane. Then, Rebs explained that they were selecting leaders for a group through fights, and the money was good. Here, pride and money were motivators, and he couldn't deny that was also what motivated him, right? No? But his idea was to stay out of battles, right? No? So the plan was to hire the elect prince, but Rebs wanted Randy Wu in the competition no matter what. Rod wouldn't have sent this guy there if he didn't believe in his abilities, right? Then, Rebs asked the guys if anyone wanted to take on the rookie. It was a perfect opportunity, my friends. Everyone volunteered to challenge Randy Wu, and he was left with no choice at the moment. So, since he had to fight, he decided he couldn't slack off, even if he had to use all his strength. His opponent introduced himself as Max and came in boasting, saying that his scrawny body with one blow was enough to smash his face. The two were ready for the fight, and Rebs started the match. Max charged at Randy, but in one move, he disarmed the guy. Are you crazy? Randy won the fight with one blow. The atmosphere became tense after all. Max was one of the strongest there. Surprisingly, this didn't deter the others, no. On the contrary, it only left everyone hungrier for a challenge. Andu wanted to avoid this, but soon he was challenged by practically all the mercenaries, so there was no way out, right, my boy? He had to defeat them one by one, taking the opportunity to show off his beautiful new skills. Then, one of the guys introduced himself as Charlotte. That's the one here, right, buddy? So, Charlotte, unlike the others, boasted that he wouldn't be embarrassed by a newbie. He got close to Randall and made fun of his size. Randall thought it would be better to take a step back, but ended up discovering the hard way that getting out of that situation wasn't an option. He realized that it was Akala's fault. After all, he just wanted to relax a bit before moving on. But that opportunity had already passed. So, with no other options, the guy realized he would have to face the trouble head-on. With nowhere to run, he decided that the only way was to confront the situation in an extremely dignified manner. With an extremely quick and precise movement, Randall applied a judo throw on his rival, knocking the big guy down instantly. And even knowing he had hit the guy, the thought running through his head was that this guy was heavier than he imagined. My brother, seeing Charlotte on the ground defeated, left even the mercenary boss speechless. Everyone was burning with curiosity, wanting to know about the strength of our protagonist. They were all eager to see how the fight with Randy Wu would turn out, which left the boy a bit discouraged, poor thing. Rebs, for his part, told the crowd to take a break and step back from Randy Wu, the newbie. He thought he would finally be able to relax, but then the rap guy announced that the chosen one was the protagonist, calling the new leader Valorette for the upcoming gathering. After that, the mercenaries began to prepare for the clash, following the command of the guild leader. Then, on the battlefield, everything turned into chaos, and Rebs shouted for the guys to charge. At that moment, all the mercenaries charged forward, but they encountered an army of trolls staring them down. Andrew, without thinking twice, jumped into the fray, attacking mercilessly, already under pressure, thinking he was now on the side of the elect prince. The web had already explained that they were getting caught up in a war against the orcs of the Demon King Pezamite. The mission was straightforward: steal the enemy commander's military flag. As soon as the troops broke through the enemy's defenses, they would exploit the opening and push through the enemy's line of defense. However, Rebs came to realize that the orcs were very proud and strong and knew how to work together like few others. He told Valortech that it was his job to lead the group and halt the advance of the enemies. Then, back to the chaos on the battlefield, Randall found it surreal to have to guide a bunch of Athertet mercenaries. His plan was just to gain a bit of fame in the war and then get the hell out of there. Soon, an orc approached the captain, warning that the spearmen were being massacred. The captain, in doubt, couldn't believe it. What, my spearmen? These guys were some of the bravest warriors he had. So, he grabbed a telescope to check the situation, and looking out over the battlefield was shocked by the scene of the mercenaries led by Randy Wu. The captain ordered the soldiers to form a line and align the muskets, and shortly afterward, they opened fire against the humans. Andal thought that using muskets wasn't the best tactic, as they took a long time to reload and still required a lot of of alternation. So when the enemies changed their firing line position, the protagonist shouted, "Now is the time to attack!" Everyone began to advance, trampling over the enemies. One of the orcs, unable to believe that such weak humans were decimating his soldiers, knew he had to stop the advance. After all, he was the one carrying the flag with the tribe's history. But the orc with the flag didn't stand a chance, and in the end, the mercenaries emerged victorious. Andil captured the flag for the group and thought he just had to hold on a bit longer to earn the recognition he wanted. But then, suddenly, an ally arrived with a bombshell. The rest of the army was retreating instead of advancing, and, to make matters worse, the orc reinforcements had just arrived. He panicked, thinking victory was within his grasp. This guy was completely lost because everyone was running away. One of his men asked, "What now, boss? What do we do?" The whole group was surrounded and already worried about the situation. On the other side, the disguised chief, the hulking General Kalian, ordered his men to give up the fight. He stated that if they retreated now and left the flag behind, he would honor their courage and spare their lives. Andil retorted that the word of an orc meant nothing to him and that he would use their flag in an extremely useful way, if you catch my drift. However, Kalian, furious, shouted, "How dare you want to stain our sacred flag, you worthless dog?" Randy replied that in a war there were no rules for winning. He and his crew were ready for anything. With that, our protagonist managed to provoke an enemy. The orcs quickly formed up, and Kalian ordered them to shoot. Now, the humans were at a disadvantage, being bombarded with fire. The protagonist's system notified him that the intimidation attempt had failed, but he didn't understand why it had worked in previous games. Still, he and his entire crew were now taking enemy fire. His men began to lose faith in victory. After all, they had to face a famous general, and the morale of the young ones crumbled at the idea of facing someone as strong as General Kalian. Even Randy, the civilian with no way out, had a flashback of past battles. He remembered that if he died here, it would also be game over in real life. Randall was in shock, overwhelmed by all the information racing through his mind, and to make matters worse, his men were demanding orders, or else they were done for. But then, the guy suddenly started laughing, making everyone think he was going crazy. But Randy remembered Charlotte's trumpet and asked to play it. An ally mentioned that there would be no reinforcements, even with the sound of the trumpet. Still, our protagonist was confident he knew what to do. He made the trumpet sound with all its might. So, one of his allies said that the trumpet was in the opposite direction of where his friends had gone astray. Andil replied that he was tuned in and asked his friends to hold their ground and protect themselves quickly. Meanwhile, he thought that if Aquila had any honor, she wouldn't leave him hanging now, right? Since she was an extremely important figure on the other side, over there with the enemy, General Wark ordered his pikemen to unleash hell. Out of nowhere, an orc warrior attacked the humans. He aimed his spear at Randywu, but before he could strike, the enemy was hit. And then someone appeared in the battle, Purg, mounted on a unicorn. She heard the sound of the trumpet and decided to give those humans a boost to keep fighting. That warrior was shouting at everyone not to lower their swords, and that the clash wasn't over yet. The orc boss commanded his soldiers not to interfere, stating that this is the countess in charge. The fight had now turned into a duel of nobles. Purg told the general that he might be honest, but he was a miserable wretch, and then charged at him, initiating a crazy battle between the two. Randy could only stand there, mesmerized, watching that intense battle. Even though it was just the beginning of the story, Valpurgis was proving to be a true combat machine. The orc man was fumbling. Valpurgis was holding nothing back. She launched attacks with surreal force, but the orc was tough to take down. The opponent praised her sword skills and even gave her a discount, saying she also excelled in hand-to-hand combat. He suggested that she must be Valpurgis's sister, because her rank made total sense. Valpurgis stated that she served God with all her heart and didn't like to waste time, and charged back into the attack. General Wark began to get fired up, attacking in earnest, but Valpurgis was much faster. She dodged his thrusts and counterattacked fiercely. Man, after a while, Wark recognized that it had indeed been an intense battle, and then he collapsed, defeated to the ground. His men realized that the battle had been lost, and they take off with their fallen captain. Andil is completely shocked that the captain, so strong, was brought down with just one blow. He realizes this must be the true power of the Valpurgis law. Valpurgis approaches and asks, "Are you the leader of the mercenaries?" She says she felt his courage from afar, then begins to introduce herself in an official manner. Andil, all emotional, introduces himself as Valister Valor, greeting her. He then comments that if it weren't for her, everyone would be in dire straits. But he continues, concluding by saying that he is no longer in the electric-style character, so he needs to compose himself. At that point, Randy Wu's group arrives, letting him know they have something for him. They hand a flag of the enemy to Valor, as he is the leader now. This quickly boosts our Randy Wu's credibility among the mercenaries. Andil remembers the intense conflict that occurred and starts to celebrate. He raises the flag and announces that it now belongs to him. After some time at Francois's tavern, a girl appears asking for Charlotte. She is completely enchanted by her. The girl notices his wounds and asks, "Wow, did you go through another war or what?" Curious, Andil asks if she she is Charlotte's daughter, but one of the mercenaries says no, she is Charlotte's 15-year-old younger sister, Baptiste. The girl scolds Andil, saying that her brother got hurt because of him and demands that he pay for the doctor quickly. Charlotte defends him, stating that thanks to their leader, everyone returned alive. Everyone confirms, saying that the leader saved him from being devoured by orcs. Andil, all embarrassed, asks them to celebrate quietly and eat in silence. At that moment, Valpurgis enters the tavern, capturing everyone's full attention. Andil is surprised. He did not expect to see that lady there. After some time, she takes Andil to the advanced base of Rafan. Valpurgis explains that the Steel Elector himself requested her presence, wanting to bestow military honors. She comments that this is incredible, as it is the highest honor a mercenary can receive. Rondio thinks that Valpurgis, it's quite different from what was in his head. She seems much more excited about the honor than he does. The Countess explains that these soldiers were saved because of Rondio's efforts, and if it weren't for his bravery, none of them would have survived. And these are the people of the Empire who are alive thanks to him, which is why she is radiant. This brings an old memory back to Randy Wu's mind, where Porgos protected him in an extremely unusual situation. He understands that she hasn't changed, but their reaction now is very different in this new context. He is a mercenary, and she is a noble Alpurgis. So, he approaches Her Majesty and introduces Randy Wu. The Steel Elector says he is pleased to finally meet the famous valor of our boy. He introduces himself simply as Felipe Randy Wu. He bows before the noble, thinking that the presence of a true guardian is insane. Felipe begins by recounting that Randy became known as the Death of the Field, and congratulates the courage of our boy, comparing his bravery to that of a lion. A guy like that deserves a reward. Then, with that, he starts announcing that he will give 100 florins to the mercenaries and 300 florins to Randy Wu. Andy swears that one day he will repay this immense generosity, but adds that he has a new request. He would like to regroup with his companions and rest in Wittenberg. Felipe agrees, even though Wittenberg is far away, and also offers an empty barn for Randy to use. Moreover, he asks if Randy needs anything else, and Randy thinks he would normally say no, but faced with this bizarre situation, he looks at Valpurgis and has an idea. So he comments that he has a personal question for the king. Felipe tells him to ask, stepping forward. Randy throws out the question. What is the Steel Elector's opinion on the insane war? The room falls silent, and you can even hear a fly buzz. Felipe, in turn, takes a moment to think before answering, and the atmosphere grows tense. A doubt begins to linger in the air. It was exactly what Randy feared. Everyone was confused. After all, he was just a mercenary, right? But Felipe, with that curious look, brings the question back to Randy. He replies that his perspective is limited, but one thing really caught his attention. One of the nobles at the table jumps into the conversation, questioning whether he thinks he's experienced enough to weigh in on the war just because he has earned military merit, right? Then, another noble chimes in, suggesting that Randy must have only heard rumors and is suddenly worrying for no reason. But then Valpurgis steps in to defend our young man. She states that one cannot judge someone by appearances, and suggests that His Majesty Felipe gives the young mercenary a chance to share his thoughts. Felipe's uncle critiques Valpurgis for her boldness, but Felipe counters, asserting that Valpurgis is the niece of the Elector of Bavaria and deserves respect. At this point, no Steel Elector can ignore Valpurgis's words. Felipe finally says he will listen to Randy Wu and asks what his view is on this so-called war. He inquires, Randy Wu, how do you know it's an ambush? How does this guy know an ambush is being plotted? Randy explains that the main strategy of the Demon King Pizamute has always been ambushes and betrayals, citing the 10-year war with the Two Kingdom and the 6-year battle against Margavia Hart. In both situations, Felipe's maneuvers were decisive, and everyone knows that. With this, Randy emphasizes that keeping an eye out for betrayals and such is never too much. Felipe becomes somewhat unsettled and snaps, "Are you telling me we have a traitor among us?" Randy simply responds that he is considering the possibility and believes that the best thing to do is to be cautious. Felipe ends up agreeing with this and says that the mercenary is quite bold, but soon anger boils over. Felipe retorts, and now he begins to shout, telling the protagonist to know his place. This guy was really tough, and Valpurgis tries to help and gets involved, but Randall takes a step back. He apologizes for what he said and asks to leave the presence of the nobles. As he retreats, Randall thinks that the Steel Elector used to be wiser once, but now he's arrogant, and that makes no sense. This guy knows that something is completely wrong this time. First, the fruits of the Red Dragon, which always come late, arrived much earlier than expected. Additionally, Valpurgis, who would normally arrive later, was already there earlier than I had anticipated, where I conclude that everything is different. While reflecting, Valpurgis calls him running. She catches up to him and he is astonished. "Wow, you run really fast, huh?" Randall asks if she ran after him worried. She confirms and apologizes for Felipe's words. Furthermore, she offers to help with whatever is necessary. Then, with so much kindness from the Countess, Randall feels quite awkward. His thoughts race upon hearing that she would do anything for him, but in reality, those thoughts just stay in his head. So, he asks for something quite peculiar, a feather and a pistol. Valpurgis is intrigued. Is that really all you want? That girl usually doesn't offer herself like that to just anyone. Randall said that his dream is to become a knight. He plans to use the items he asked for to learn to ride. Valpurgis comments that she's never seen anyone as dedicated as him. She also argues that this is not the place to be talking about such things and suggests taking him to a somewhat more private corner. Valpurgis, then joyful, makes our Randy Woo's eyes shine with happiness. Sometime later, on the battlefield of Raphaem, the army of the Steel Elector stands facing the soldiers of the Demon King Pishimu. Felipe, looking dead serious, tells the enemy, "Today is the day I'm going to kill you." But Pishimu, dismissing his rival, heard one of his allies saying that the preparations for war were complete and takes the opportunity to warn to use that woman. It might be a terrible idea, but the Demon King disagrees. The ally argues that this woman is too cruel. If they capture the Elector, he will be a valuable hostage. You can't trust someone like that, a lunatic. Seymour says he is already familiar with this and will take all the precautions. The woman then introduces herself, stepping closer to her lord. He praises her, but tells her not to get too carried away. She replies that she always knows how far she can go, but the Demon King reminds her that this is not true. Nonetheless, she reaffirms that she has never crossed the line until now. The Demon Lord, deep in thought, reflects, "It's true. I don't even want to imagine if she actually crossed the limits." Back with Randall, he is training with his new horse. Feely, that's his name, is a wild animal, incredibly fast for a dual horse. Randall concludes that Feely is more suitable for the young lady of the Bayana household, and even gained Valpurgis, a very expensive potion that regenerates whoever drinks it. Out of nowhere, an explosion startles Randall. He screams that they have begun to. He yells that everyone is already starting, and that they need to run fast. In that tense moment, the Mala thought that Felipe could very well be betrayed, as he had ignored all the warnings. He was about to discover in a much harsher way that his uncle had a secret alliance with the enemy. The uncle, as if he were enjoying himself, mocks his nephew, saying he doesn't understand anything that's going on. And look, at that, this guy starts claiming that Felipe has been conspiring, turning the rebels against the emperor. After realizing this, he decided to partner with Pecha Meat, meaning the Steel Elector is the real traitor in this situation. Soon after, the old man asks, "Did you understand, Felipe?" Felipe chuckles derisively. No one is falling for this crazy nonsense, but the Demon Lord, filled with rage, throws Felipe to the ground and tells him not to be so rebellious. He still calls the poor guy a lunatic for not accepting the reality that is right in front of him. Then, he orders the dogs to take down his opponent. Felipe, terrified, screams that he is a noble, and no one should come near him while the enemy tries to capture him. Valpurgis appears silently, but soon reveals herself, delivering a kick to the Demon Lord with all her might. She didn't come alone and immediately orders her soldiers to escort Her Majesty away from that mess. The enemy, furious to see the prisoner escaping, sends Richaques after Felipe. She had been having fun with other prey, but now it's time to spring into action. Richaques, with a sinister smile, warns her pack of zombie dogs that dinner time has arrived. Apparently, she doesn't even need to try hard to motivate those little beasts. After a while, the dogs make a huge noise and set off on the hunt. Face to face with them, he thinks, of course the enemy uses zombie dogs, right? You can't expect anything less. He knows that Rex employs these little creatures to dismantle the strength of opponents, devouring them little by little. Randall considers this tactic a true insult, but he's aware of how Richaques fights. Since he hasn't encountered many dogs, he deduces that most must be after Felipe. Randall then doesn't care about the noble's safety. His focus is helping Valpurgis, therefore he runs in her direction. Nearby, Felipe and Valpurgis are trying to escape from the dogs, and Felipe complains about how terrible his mana control is and blames the enemy. Only the Demon Lord can pull off such a trick, right? In the midst of the escape, a dog leaps and almost grabs Felipe, but Valpurgis arrives just in time and redirects the creature. Her speed against the enemies proves effective once again. Concerned for Her Majesty's safety, Valpurgis warns that they are in demonic territory and need to exercise extreme caution. Suddenly, one of Felipe's allies is hit, and he quickly cries out for His Majesty's help, but Felipe doesn't even budge. Valpurgis tries to intervene, but Felipe cuts her off. "Let's go, brother. Let's keep going." Valpurgis, indignant, retorts that she is no better than anyone else. Her life is not worth more than the others. She believes that the true role of a noble is to protect their subjects and not to throw them into a fire. She blames herself, thinking that if Felipe had listened to her advice, none of this would have happened. In the midst of all that distress, she is suddenly captured. Richaques, with a wicked smile, finds it all so amusing. Valpurgis screams for help from Felipe, but upon seeing an ally being captured, he decides it's better to exit the scene. He leaves Valpurgis behind, as if she meant nothing to him. Valpurgis realizes she has been completely deceived. A guy like Felipe doesn't deserve the title of Elector. Meanwhile, she continues to attack, clearly enjoying the suffering of her target. Suddenly, there was a gunshot nearby, and they see that one of the dogs has been shot down. Taking advantage of the distraction, Randy doesn't waste any time and delivers a powerful punch to Rajax. Valpurgis, surprised to see the mercenary coming to save her, can hardly believe it. She never thought he would be there. Even so, she is happy and calls him a hero, but look, that euphoria didn't last long. She quickly faints and falls to the ground. Randy begins to move Valpurgis carefully to a place that is a bit safer. He knows he will only be able to get her out of there after he deals with Rajax. Rajax, for her part, noticed that Randy had taken down one of her dogs and arrived so stealthily that she didn't even see him. She concludes that this guy is not a warrior like the others. Then, Randy approaches Rajax and starts to speak. "Look at you, still the same as ever, Rajax." Intrigued, he asks if he really knows him. He replies that he will never forget that villain's face. Achax comments on his weapon, which is quite nice and has good range, right? But he says, it's better to aim properly, isn't it? Your whip might catch you. Randy doesn't waste any time and fires, however. He only manages to hit the enemy's cloak. Rachax quickly tries to entangle him with her whip, ultimately catching Randy by the neck and immobilizing him. She pulls him close and headbutts him. With such strength that he flies animatedly, Rachake's release is still not over, my dear, but when she tries to strike him again, she misses the attack. After dodging, Randall tries to attack from a distance, but the enemy is already aware of his strategy. She lunges at him to try to intercept the shot, but when it comes time to use the whip, she ends up missing the attack. Unbelievable. It's crazy. Until now, no one had managed to do something like this. Rachake has always been the true champion with the whip, and she thought of herself as the best. So how could anyone dodge her blows? It was something beyond her imagination, without a doubt. Randolph, for his part, was ready to pull the trigger, but Rachake was determined not to let that happen. And to her surprise, the guy did something totally unexpected. Instead of firing, he got closer and, in an extremely quick movement, plunged the dagger into her. And then he enjoyed the dagger. "Rachax," he said to her with that typical sarcastic little smile of his. Rachax realized that paying too much attention to the guy's weapon cost her one of her eyes. She needed to regroup, and quickly. It was then that she opened her demonic wings, trying to pull away rapidly. "As I said, I would love to stay and continue this insane fight, but I will have to withdraw. The fight will be for another time." But one does not miss the chance and starts to provoke her. "Oh, you're scared of losing, isn't that right?" Rachax replied, that she wouldn't fall for his cheap provocation. After all, fighting up close wasn't her strong suit. Mandiu responded that he knew that well, but look, he also said that he had a weapon and could attack from a distance. The demon servant, boasting, assured that she could easily dodge the bullets. But when she tried to focus, she realized her sense of distance was completely messed up, especially because of the loss of one eye. Randy Wu didn't waste any time and shot, hitting a bat squarely. He made a comment. "Oh, more efficient is always a direct shot." Seeing the opponent being hit, he couldn't help but let out a beautiful smile. "Ah, I think you are finally getting to know your own pain and the pain against them. Raibo, but tell me, what are you going to drop when I finish you off? I expected you to struggle to seduce him and avoid defeat, but did not count on our boy's cold heart." Her attempt was a true fiasco. After the fight, Andal was left with some victory items, extremely satisfied, but he knew time was running out. He needed to act fast before it was too late. He grabbed a healing potion and ran towards Alberg's, aware that it was the only thing that could save her in that critical situation. He could analyze all those potion instructions carefully and realized he had to apply it quickly where the wound was, but that meant removing her armor. He tried to clear his mind, convincing himself that doing this was only to help her, nothing more, and focused firmly, swearing not to make a mistake. Meanwhile, Randall had a striking memory of his past. His father died young from an illness, and his mother fainted from working too much because of it. Alone at 18, he started his life away from home, and at 22, finally found a job as a debt collector in Ranadong. Although this guy tried to come off as tough, he ended up being understanding with the people who owed money. It was then that he met a client who spent all his time playing video games. The kid said that if he completed an important mission, he would get enough money to pay off his debts. Intrigued, Randall asked more about this game, and the guy talked about an incredible universe with characters more beautiful than real life. He started explaining that it was an RPG, but had the advantage of, people playing from all over the world, and they even paid the best to complete the hard missions. Randall thought that was a bit weird, right? Isn't it that someone makes money playing? But the guy invited him to try it out, and at first he refused because he had a packed schedule. But everything changed when he received a cancellation message. Now he had free time, right? So soon he found himself entering the game for the first time. Using the virtual reality capsule, he was shocked by so much technology. It was too realistic. Even the people in the street looked real, making him doubt whether he was actually in a game. And out of nowhere, he spotted a fruit vendor, finding the old man incredibly realistic. He decided to touch his face to see if it was all real, but the guy quickly cut in and said he only served those with money to buy his fruits. else. The game system appeared to him, showing that he had only 10 florins. Poor guy. It was better to change the subject, right? But then a little boy appeared asking for an apple. His mother, poor thing, had nothing in her pocket. Trying to help the poor, Randall asked the vendor the price of the fruit. It was 1 florin. He quickly bought the apple, handed it to the boy, and the boy's mother thanked him, stating that he didn't need to have spent money. Then, with that interaction, Randall realized that 1 florin was enough for a meal a day. He quickly said goodbye to the boy and his mother, remembering his own moments with his mother when he would walk with her and dream of a roast chicken on the corner of their street. And so he began to fall in love with that game. That day was the lucky start, and from then on, he never stopped playing. When life truly became insane, Randall used the game as an escape. He got glued to the game, putting real life aside. There, he released all the pressure he accumulated at work, while waking up to only have to work in real life. Then he transformed it all. After all, it brought him a new way of living. He spent 5 years playing, until at a certain point in the game, he met Duchess Valpurgis for the first time. She said she had heard of his skills and made a proposal to go hunting boars together. He started to say that he was actually after meat, and she showed up at the perfect time. It didn't take long for Randall to capture the boar, while Valpurgis kept an eye on him, admiring his maneuvers. He found it bizarre that she didn't even move, just watched the spectacle. Then Valpurgis remarked that all of it was so easy. For him, it wasn't worth getting involved, and he immediately called the guy to form a partnership, where mine, in doubt, asked if it was some kind of contract where he would have to work for her all day. Wow, the guy was already scared. Valpu started laughing and said it was nothing like that, silly, playing innocent and questioning whether he didn't trust her. Andil simply retorted that he didn't trust anyone. This left Vaporos finding it very amusing. Then she had an idea and decided to recommend him to become the Knight of the Empire, and sure enough, it happened quickly. Even as a supporter of his potential, Valpurgis was impressed to see how he leveled up, becoming the Steel Elector. Andil commented that he didn't get there alone, and that if it weren't for her, none of his dreams would have been realized. Valpurgis countered that those he saved were proof that peace had been earned, and with that, he gained the loyalty of the people. It wasn't just that, he also won her, Loyalty, who had always admired the Steel Elector. Bringing it back to reality, Valpurgis's ideas about Randur were firmer than ever, because things were different now. I felt a special fondness for him. It was impressive to see someone so dedicated, even so young. Then she asked a question. Boy, what motivates you? Nandio replied that he loves everything about this world, and everything that comes with it. No matter how much he had, everyone had already said. Paul Pogue had already understood a little more deeply, but argued that he shouldn't have taken off the armor, even though he insisted he needed to do it to help her. Changing the subject, Valpurgis said they would go to the Valpurga convent soon, as the others needed to know they were alive. She made a point of promising that when they returned, she would repay the kindness. After all, he had saved her life, right? Even facing death, Randy thought naively that he might not have a chance. Valpurgis mentioned that, besides her, the convent probably had rewards, but he was sincerely only interested in hers. After a while, they arrived at the convent of Valpurgis. She introduced Randiwu to Angela, and right off the bat, revealed that she couldn't let him in, claiming that the government was on lockdown. Randiwu, lost in his thoughts about recent events, contemplated asking the convent of Valpurgis for the Heart of the Angel, an ancient and sacred artifact, considered rank S, blessed by the goddess. This item had the surreal power to bring souls back. Whoever possessed it would have a chance at a new life. Randy wanted that. It would be an incredible trump card on his journey. As he delved into his reflections, Valpurgis suddenly appeared in his room. She apologized for entering unannounced, but was visibly surprised to see him hanging upside down. Randy simply explained that he thought it helped him think better. Valpurgis then revealed that he needed to share something confidential, but first asked him not to tell anyone. With confidence, she began to speak about how the High Abbess had fallen into decline. Randy was like, "What the fuck? How so, bro?" Because they had just spoken about Angela, but Valpurgis clarified that the current abbess was Margareta. She also had suspicions that there was a traitor among them, probably a play by Pezemo. And the big surprise for Randiwu, Margareta was alive, something he hadn't even considered. Margareta was the living legend that could subjugate even the strongest demon king. She was a symbol of strength and had turned the convent of Valpurgis into a respectable battalion. In light of this, Randy jumped up, deciding that he needed to rescue her immediately. Wow, Valpurgis was extremely scared and asked what was going on. Randy insisted on the urgency of finding the abbess's altar, and Valpurgis, who knew darkness well, agreed to go with him. Soon, in the convent's office, Angela overheard Valpurgis's plans, and the girl assured her that he was trustworthy. But Angela didn't seem too enthusiastic about that idea, did she? She quickly deduced that Valpurgis, he had told everything about the abbess because it explained his fear. Suddenly, Angela appeared near them, startling them and saying that there was a traitor among among them, and that trusting a stranger would be a reckless move. She also stated that this stranger was not worthy of being there and ordered the guards to escort him out. Randy quickly defended himself, claiming he was concerned for the well-being of the High Abbess, but Angela finally cut off the conversation, saying it was none of his business. Ignoring all that negativity, Randy revealed that he had already read the Gospel of the Seven Demons. Wow. Angela was now shocked, not understanding how it was possible, since the book was a work by St. Anthony himself. The guy explained that the book talked about various troubles, all 7 demons banned from this world, including death, a force considered to be one of the most violent. Angela warned that merely mentioning those names increased the possibility of terrible things happening, making the conversation even more complicated. Yet, Randy pleaded for her trust, claiming he knew exactly how to repel darkness. Angela agreed under one condition. He needed to keep everything a secret, and if she found out he mentioned even a comma, she promised to drag him to hell and bring him back shortly after. Randy was taken to a private place. An absolutely disgusting smell invaded his nostrils. He remembered the smell of Angela's office, but this was 1,000 times worse. Randy had never seen Margarita's face before, but he had heard the legend about her, which said she could leg press a ton on each side. Valpurgis, noticing the guy's attention, tried to calm him down. Randy asked, "Are you trying to have a body as incredible as the other fairs? Is that it?" She said yes, but her super bossy uncle wouldn't let her train enough. When they arrived, Angela remarked that the demonic energy of the place was very strong and that it was easy to go insane. She asked everyone to chill outside. When he opened the door, Randall felt an insane vibration of power emanating from inside. Valpurgis commented that it was protected by the goddess's blessing, but she was worried about Randall. The crazy guy replied that he was calm. His system had its own protection tricks, so he thought he could go ahead. Angela then declared that this place was the chamber of the abbess. When Randall saw it, he was taken aback, completely speechless. He never thought Margarita had that kind of vibe. He quickly questioned how someone who seemed so fragile could handle absurd weights. Angela, with a firm hand, said he had to take it seriously. She explained that they did everything and could count on Margarita, and in the end, they had to rely on an army of mercenaries. Even with her idea, she made it clear that Randall was their last chance and promised she would pay whatever he asked, as long as he saved the abbess. Randall agreed to help, but first asked Frida to release him. He then began to speak about how Margarita's situation was critical. As a saint, her consumption of darkness was double the normal. The dark veins on her neck were proof of that, but he stated that there was still a way to save her. Desperate, Angela started to ask what they were going to do. Randall asked her to stay calm. After a while, he began to explain that the process was quite simple. All they needed was to use a divine relic from the convent. Angela looked at the abbess, asking if Randall was referring to the angel's heart. Her understanding was that the abbess's dark curse would be transferred to another person to absorb. However, since divine power and curses are opposites, the abbess's death would be certain during the transfer. That's why the angel's heart was crucial. Randall confirmed that it was all right. The curse was fatal for any cleric, so no one from the convent could use this method. That was exactly why he was there. But Angela countered, saying that this method would not work. The abbess herself had said that it was her burden and that no one should suffer in her place. Andy offered to be the receptacle of the curse, but Angela refused. She emphasized that they were dealing with a dark curse, full of unknown causes and symptoms. This was no joke at all. Furthermore, after being possessed, Randall would have to live with it for the rest of his life. Valpurgis supported Angela, stating that there was no reason for Randall to sacrifice his life for the sake of the High Abbess. Andy thanked him for his concern, but insisted that this was the best option. He had read the Gospel of the Seven Demons and knew darkness well. Being no cleric, he was not vulnerable to it. Moreover, he was just a stranger. Angela didn't have to worry about his well-being, but rather about the High Abbess. In the end, Angela relented, but said that when the High Abbess woke up, she was sure she wouldn't like this idea at all. Even so, she presented the heart of the angel to Randall. After taking the artifact, Randall considered saving it for later, but realized it was the perfect opportunity to make Margarita an ally. Valpurgis tried to convince him to change his mind about the plan, but Angela said that Randall was a man and just wanted to see what would happen next. Ready to begin, Randall started the ritual. He placed Margarita's hand and uttered some magical words. Shortly afterward, he began to feel the effects of the curse. Not only him, but even Angela and Valpurgis, though far away, noticed the manifestation of evil around them. Then, Randall was transported to another dimension. Looking around, he saw that it was all dark, but he knew he had to find the source of the darkness. At that moment, a voice manifested, asking who dared to disturb her. Randall introduced himself as Val Ted Valor and declared that he was there to free Margarita. The voice, with no respect, He mocked him and said that a mere mortal couldn't do that. He added that it was insane to confront someone so powerful, then ordered him to disappear from his sight. But to her surprise, he couldn't take the soul from Randy Wu and didn't strike, because Randy Wu, relaxed, asked the being of darkness to free Margarita and use him as the new vessel. The enemy replied that he would not accept orders from a mere mortal. Besides, he was used to consuming souls, not freeing them. Andal thought the enemy was playing dirty, so he had to do the same. He declared that he was familiar with the Gospel of the Seven Demons, even trading his dog for that book, and surely that entity was selling cheap copies to other sages. Therefore, Randy asserted that if his enemy continued to prolong the situation, all of his intimate secrets would be revealed. The provocation worked, and the enemy agreed to the exchange, but with one condition. As soon as Randy heard this, a mission rolled out in the system to take out all the demon kings that were supporting the destruction. Wow, this guy became pensive, huh? This wouldn't do. Maybe he'd have to find some way to negotiate something better with the enemy, because he was too weak to do that, right? Look, instead of exchanging ideas, the shadow being decided to grant a bit of its sinister power to Andal to accomplish the new task. Looking at the situation, Andal was in total shock, thinking that death was almost knocking at his door. He blurted out that this wasn't what he had agreed to, but the shadow being left and knocked, saying that nothing in this world comes for free. To have real power, one needed to pay a high price. Andal felt pierced by an insane pain while the process happened, and even after getting an absurd upgrade, ended up kicking the bucket. Only later, he woke up exhausted and scared in a bed at the convent, realizing he was alive, and soon remembered the artifact that had given him a second chance. Wow. The guy was extremely happy with his new skills. He thought, look at that, I'm going to be the king of necromancy commanding a legion of the undead. And not only that, he was the only player with these powers. Check out the hack activating quickly. He climbed to the top of the game leaderboard, believing that he would finally be recognized. As he celebrated his new feats, Valpergos showed up, clearly bothered. She mentioned that she heard his voice and was left speechless upon seeing he was awake. Valpergos explained that after the ritual he passed out and she took him to her room. Now that he was back on his feet, she told him to never pull a stunt like that again because she was really worried. Oh, how sweet! Andal took his friend's hand and apologized for putting her in that weird vibe. He promised he wouldn't make the same mistake again. Then Valpergos accepted his apology, but they both heard a noise outside. Randy arrived all worried and asked what was happening now. Angela noticed that besides Randy, the others had woken up, and finally, he saw what was causing all the commotion. Margarita was there, saying she had slept too much and needed to move around a bit. She also said she was happy and was finally going to meet the one who saved her. Then she put on a bit of a ladylike demeanor and introduced herself as Margarita, the abbess of the Valpurga convent, and that he already knew her name, but could call her Marie. After the introductions, the group headed to the basement. Andal thought Felipe had already left the dense forest, having reached the highest level of necromancer, cold blood. He was planning to take out Felipe quietly, the rascal, but without the angel's heart, which was a guardian, his chances were pretty slim. He knew he needed to stay sharp until the end, even if Margareta was all hyped up for a new adventure. So, seeing all that excitement, Angela told Margareta to be more cautious, but the abbess shot back, saying that Angela's age was making her too timid. Even Randy Wu found Margarita's exaggerated attitude strange, but Valpergos assured that she really was like that. Randy Wu noticed that someone like Margarita had to be the youngest and strongest military force in the convent. He expected a more dignified demeanor. My brother, upon catching the two of them talking, interrupted Margarita. Look at that. It seems you two have a strong connection, huh? She explained that behind the door was Valpurga's armory, filled with all kinds of equipment. Many items weren't just weapons. Some were even quite beautiful. Randall thanked for the access, and Margarita quickly replied, "Oh, you can pay me by taking me to the meeting." Angela was furious to hear this, even though Margarita thought it was nothing unusual. Then, Margarita opened the door with the right equipment. Randall had no issues with Felipe, so it was all good. Sometime later, you've already liked the video, right? No way, my brother. Randall headed to the stable to find his horse. Now that he was properly equipped, he was eager to bump into Felipe, but while he was preparing to leave, Valpergos appeared asking, "Are you really going to leave without saying goodbye?" She invited him for one last ride. On the way, Valpergos commented that she was leaving and that they had just met not long ago, but it felt like they had known each other for ages. She recalled everything they had experienced together, fighting side by side against the orcs, saving their skins in the ambush, against Reyes, and rescuing the abbess. Because of all that, she felt an immense gratitude. After a moment, Valpergos asked with a curious look, "Do you have any curiosity?" Randall, pretending he didn't get it, replied, "Curiosity? About what?" Valpergos giggled. "Don't play dumb, silly. I know you're curious to see what my face looks like without the helmet." Andrew admitted that since she was always covered, he thought there was a special reason and that it would be better not to ask. Anyway, Valpergos revealed that underneath the helmet, there was an extremely large scar. The result of a curse. She didn't even know that the curse was just that her uncle kept saying people shouldn't find out, telling her to hide the mark. She sighed, saying, Oh, people always call me an ugly knight, without knowing the story behind the helmet. Then, she mustered the courage and declared that even though she wouldn't show her face to anyone, she would make an exception for him. Valpergos felt nervous because this wasn't normal for her, but as soon as she took off the helmet, Randall could see her face for the first time. Then, she asked, somewhat shyly, So, what do you think of my appearance? Say something, come on. That's where I was completely lost, not knowing what to do. Then, the crazy guy apologized and, out of nowhere, stammered, You're still really pretty, right? The guy stopped to think that not even the Countess had shown her face before, which shocked him. Valpergos, then full of mystery, said she had something to give him. She pulled out a family treasure passed down through her uncle. Wow, why am I receiving something so special? Randall was surprised and quite confused. Valpergos replied, Oh, this is just a mere symbol. As long as you have this, I will always be by your side. Randall was extremely happy with the gift, realizing that Valpergos wanted to make her presence felt in his life. I will take good care of this treasure, he promised, stating that it was a promise, and she just thanked him with a beautiful smile. With that, Randall said goodbye, already explaining that he needed to take a walk. He said that if she wanted, she could go ahead. Valpergos returned the gesture, letting him go. They lingered there for a while, insisting on playing before finally saying goodbye. Sometime later, Randall stayed there reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought that the romantic vibe with Valpergos wouldn't be a terrible idea, but was interrupted. A horrible smell filled the air, and he realized he was surrounded by several fallen warriors. Glancing around, he concluded that Philip and the pet Simon had run into trouble there. Randall knew he was on the right track. He cast a spell to clean up the place. And look, he found something really cool. With a strong movement, he activated his necromancer powers, making all the bodies fall and then rise as his servants. The guy is badass. Randy Woo's first mission was to scour the surroundings for any clues about Felipe. He pointed to one of the servants and said, You have a special task, my dear. Bring all the military uniforms you have. They will be super useful in a city not far from the battlefield. Felipe was with some of the men. This guy had not yet gotten over his uncle's betrayal and was focused on revenge. After a little while, he took some food, even though a soldier had said it was for emergencies. The prince didn't care. His selfish prince instincts took over. So, in the midst of this vibe, someone appeared saying they were looking for him. The protagonist introduced himself as a mercenary. She's worth something. Do you remember me, Prince? Felipe recognized him immediately, while Soldier Anina urged caution, warning that they were in an extremely dangerous situation. Irritated by the interruption, the prince punched the soldier. He let it slip that this mercenary had come to rescue him, since he had hired him before. Worms like you are not as useful as Barlos, Ted. Felipe was mocking all his soldiers, and now that he was in the company of a badass mercenary, he didn't need them anymore, so they were dismissed. Then, Felipe went towards the protagonist, practically pleading to be saved. Randil said he was glad to finally have found him, as he had searched the entire forest for his majesty. Felipe even cried with joy, promising to reward the mercenary as soon as they returned. But Randil replied that this would not be necessary. Felipe was now confused, not understanding what was happening, but the guy said he was not there for rewards. He began to speak in a voice that chilled the air and said he was there only to settle scores with him. Felipe was left completely unsteady. He said that the cub doesn't know how to fear a tiger, and that he had been creating a mutt all along, everything. Our protagonist not only accepted the provocation, but also mimicked a dog, mocking the prince who was on fire with rage. Felipe drew his blade, which shone like the moon, and attacked some of the undead. Randall hoped the prince wouldn't fall without a fight, but he knew that the more allies Felipe called, the less mana he would have, so he ordered his undead to retreat. Felipe thought that defeating the henchman wasn't that complicated, but Randy warned him that with him, the fight would be a different story. He also said he had something special reserved just for the prince. The two finally clashed in battle. The prince's eyes were on fire with fury, enraged by the betrayal, and Randall was facing an opponent he had prepared to confront forever. Randall realized that this was the sword of choice. Looking at the same sword he used and cherished was a bit of a drag, you know? Even though it was beautiful, its vintage style masked a deadly strike, ready to attack. Just see, whoever is worthy of that iron throne can wield the sacred blade. Felipe, with that mocking look and tone, challenges, if you really think you can stab me and still live peacefully afterwards? Randall remained completely calm. In the end, he speaks the truth and approaches very calmly, along with the little nuns. The prince, with a bug in his ear, was astonished to learn that the mercenary had such strong connections, but he quickly retorted that he wasn't afraid of any religious group. Felipe charged at Randall again, but the guy dodged effortlessly, only making the prince even more enraged. He remembers the beating he took from the dark vampires on the last outing, and Randall, with utmost tranquility, tells Felipe, "Your drama, my boy, is coming to an end, you know?" The guy delivers such a strong kick that makes the prince bleed. Randall opens his mouth and says that maybe Felipe should be more afraid of him than the little nuns Felipe, all tangled up, mumbles that he is weak from the previous battle, hence the reason for his defeat. Randy, getting irritated, the guy still tries to remind Randy, and at some point he acknowledged his talent. Why is he fighting with him now? Randy, already somewhat annoyed, hits him straight and says that Felipe is more foolish than he thought. First, he ignored the warning of betrayal coming from his own house. Second, he dismissed Vaporgo despite all the things she had done. And lastly, he let a bunch of people take the hit because of him. So, in light of all this, Randall thinks Felipe should be ashamed to flaunt the title. Desperate, Felipe starts shouting that everything he did was for his people. Who will sustain the citizens if he kicks the bucket, he demands, insisting that his death would be a bonanza for other voters to take advantage of. Randall acknowledges that Felipe raised a good point, then decides to give him another chance. He says that if Felipe agrees, he will give him a healing potion. The guy, completely desperate, accepts anything to avoid dying. Randall tells the prince to kneel and ask forgiveness from Valpurgis. Felipe agrees right away and even promises to give 10,000 flowers to House Bureau. Then our protagonist hands over the potion, telling him to drink it all. Felipe takes a sip from the vial but lets the rest spill on the ground. Sarcastically, Randall asks if the taste didn't please the boss. Then he reveals that it wasn't an antidote or a healing potion. It was simply dragon venom. Felipe, realizing he was duped, becomes extremely furious. Randy warns him to thank Jacques because he took the poison from her personal stash. In a fit of rage, Felipe tries to attack, but is knocked down before he can get close. It wasn't Randy Wu who struck him, it was an old acquaintance. Felipe panics upon recognizing Paife, whom he thought was dead. The last time they saw each other, she was in trouble, being devoured by zombie dogs. She said that after being presumed dead. A new master saved her and gave her a second chance. Now, she says she has no ties to the prince anymore. In reality, she never liked his arrogance, and it was time for Felipe to pay for his sins. Before the story ends, Randall's system chimes in, and the lack of a voter could mess up the entire game. Angelo doesn't understand how such a disgusting guy can be crucial, but he brushes it off and thinks about solving it later. He releases Peferin to carry on with her revenge, as he had been warned. The system soon starts emitting various alarms. Even knowing that the journey will get tougher, Anju doesn't regret what she's done. Akila, who was watching from the sidelines, realizes that he really broke a seal. Anju is all confident and full of energy. Aquila loves this and wants to see him cause even more destruction. In the end, she shouts that this is just the beginning. Randy realizes that, as expected of a voter, the rewards for taking down Felipe are incredibly amazing. He gained 2 S-class skills for leveling up, but just one item, an amulet that looked ordinary. However, when he tries to analyze the item, it seems that this item creates a kind of barrier. So, Randall decides it's better to take it to Margarita and ask her to unlock it. After that, the system notifies about a transcendent being. In other words, he knows he will need to be careful when facing it. Randall's goal is to become a transcendent being one day. To do that, he needs to defeat extremely powerful enemies while leveling up in the process. At that moment, Pifera appears saying she has something important. She investigated the clues left by Felipe's goons and found some items. This must be the main reward of the mission. Without a doubt, Randall was left with a nagging feeling. Now, the gleam seemed out of this world. He asked if Peferin took care of the other matter he mentioned. Peferin had dressed Felipe's goons in Pisamute faction clothes, while the guys cried, begging for their lives. Anjuanu acknowledges that he was one of Felipe's surviving allies. Then Peferim asks, "So, master, what do we do with this fool?" He begins to watch Felipe's soldier crying like a child desperate for candy. Randall said, "I'm thinking of sending a gift to Pizzetti. I hope he likes it." After Randall left, Captain Lawrence, who was with the army team, started to take a stroll around the area. Soon he encountered a heavy scene, several bodies lying on the ground. "These here are Pizzetti's soldiers." "Sir," one of the men confirmed. Furthermore, they reported finding a surviving member of Felipe's team. Lawrence began to interrogate the survivor and discovered that both the prince and his valuable artifact had been captured. The survivor began to recount that they were forced to disperse after the attack from Pet Samet, only to be surrounded during their escape. Lawrence, with a piercing gaze, questioned, "Are you telling me you're the only one who escaped an attack and the rest ended up dead?" The guy started to shake in his boots. The survivor began to stutter, yes, and tried to justify himself. Lawrence, sighing in dismay, lamented not arriving in time to save Felipe. He told the survivor that he had put his life at risk to protect his superiors, honoring the knight's code. Then, extremely firm, he turned to the troops and said, "This survivor honored his commander until the end. In the face of danger, he maintained his unwavering bravery. He is an example that everyone should follow. Now we need to go after Prince Felipe." Then, sometime later at the Rose Palace, Laro reported that he was tracking Felipe, but had only found a few clues and nothing regarding Felipe's whereabouts. His superior, realizing this, commented that he probably hadn't found the object, right? Because Felipe wouldn't part with something so crucial. So Lawrence continued to think and pointed his finger at Pisamute. Roland noticed that name was becoming tiresome, right? No, Lawrence apologized, but Rose insisted she needed to find the object. She said that item was the only way to return Prince Felipe his voter registration. Holly noted that Felipe was not the kind of person who ends up losing in situations like this. Then he had his servant send a message to Pessimute, wishing for the return of the object. Otherwise, his mischievous expression highlighted that what comes next would be entertaining. Pessimute's base, he received the message and instantly panicked. The insane woman had resurrected. This woman, so feared even by a demon like Pessimute, was Margareta. He, who dealt with the curse that left his servant in a coma, knew very well what it was about. He reaffirmed that she was just human, but Pessimute disagreed. Margareta had invaded Off's hideout alone and managed to defeat all of his subordinates in an extremely brutal manner, and all of this happened after one of Off's men stepped on her snack. After that entire incident, Margareta earned the title of Destructive Storm among the demons. One of Pessimute's servants appeared, informing him that a message had just arrived from the queen. "Oh, Roland, this isn't the time for this," Pessimute grumbled, already having too many problems on his mind. But upon reading the letter, he didn't understand what Roland was trying to convey. He had no idea what item she was referring to. Then, Pessimute lost his composure. Now there was a lunatic behind him demanding something he didn't even know existed. His servant, on the other hand, began to deduce why Roland would think they possessed such an item. After all, they had taken nothing and had even lost the asset while chasing a Felipe. Everything seemed extremely suspicious. That servant was deep in thought. He saw the resurrection of Margarita or the sudden disappearance of that item. Everything pointed to a conclusion. But the cause was extremely nebulous. Thus, the servant began to imagine the possible connection between these events. Indirectly, it wasn't so far from being true. What he had no idea about was that this whole scheme was the work of Randy Wu. And, speaking of him, Randy sneezed and his partner asked, "Foot in the grave, partner?" "Not at all," he replied. "I'm just sensing a weird smell, my brother." Then, as he walked, a little bugger grew curious, wanting to know what his master would do with Felipe's body. However, Randy Wu had not yet made his decision. Focused, it was an extremely different matter. After all, he now possessed a gilded Imperial document. With that and Felipe's body, he believed he could do grand things. Now, he thought he would control everything, even the world. He was ugly. He was anxious, wishing for a long and prosperous life for his master. A little later, a group of buddies was heading home. They had even planned to get drunk at the first tavern they found, ready for a party. But, out of nowhere, an arrow struck one of the guys, ruining all their plans. The other buddy saw his friend fall, but was completely unresponsive. The gang ambushed the carriage coming out of the trees, but the guys in the carriage weren't going to surrender without a fight, right? They weren't crazy for revenge for the friend who had fallen, and soon there was a fierce brawl. The gang leader mocked them, stating that the mercenaries were doing well and reselling to Roland. The merchant, irritated, retorted that the bandit didn't even know who he was talking to, but the bandit didn't care about that. Then he went and disarmed the merchant, leaving him with no escape. In fact, he taunted the merchant, saying he could run to Valpurgos to ask for help, and if he wanted, he could even bring her uncle. Meanwhile, in the city of Valpurgos, she was having a moment alone with our boy, where she noticed a little stain on his face and leaned in to clean it. Suddenly, Margarita appeared searching for him, extremely frantic. So, with that abrupt entrance, the two were utterly terrified. Even Margareta was startled. It was the first time she had seen Valpurgos without his big helmet, which he was always wearing. After everything calmed down and she took a sip of water, Margarita exclaimed that she almost had a heart attack when she saw Valpurgos' clean face. She even mentioned that his face was very handsome, right? That it made her heart race. The tall beauty then tapped the radio to take good care of Valpurgos, threatening to say that if he harmed a girl like her, she could rip him in half. Changing the subject, Margareta wanted to know more about Felipe's death. Randy explained that after defeating him, he had left the prince's body in the care of his subordinate. But then Margareta insisted that Felipe was truly dead. That was a big problem. She wanted to be the one responsible for ending this, right? So, seeing her fury, Randy thought it would have been better if Felipe had kicked the bucket before meeting her. To calm Margarita down, Randy decided to show her a gift. He pulled out a bag full of money, explaining that it belonged to the prince but was now hers. He mentioned that with so much money, she could buy whatever food she wanted. Margareta wasted no time and called Randy a saint of compassion, even declaring herself more enchanted by him. Meanwhile, Valpurgos saw a pile of papers and, curious, asked what that was. Ole noticed that they were Felipe's letters, showing Holland's plans to make him the next emperor. Randy explained that the relationship between the current emperor and Holland was quite tense due to all those financial matters. Margareta added that there were also economic blockades involved. She began to clarify that the emperor was confiscating assets from all the merchant guilds linked to Roland. This was driving the cavalry units crazy. Because of this, the hacker house attacked the Ignis merchant guild. For all these reasons, Margareta revealed that Valpurgos was going through some serious stress. However, Valpurgos didn't want Randy to know any of this, but he insisted. What's going on here? With no choice, the friend agreed to tell him everything. After a while, Randall realized how tangled this situation was. He never imagined it was an economic blockade from the Emperor, and that it would escalate into a huge conflict with the Bavarian elector. Lost in his thoughts, Walpurgis arrived for a visit. She casually mentioned that she wished he would forget what he had heard before, as she didn't want to drag him into her family's problems. However, Randall insisted that he could ignore it. He wanted to help Walpurgis in any way he could, yet she insisted that the situation was too big for him to get involved in. Andy said that even if it was too big, he would fit in, so she would seek help from other allies. She held him firmly, saying he shouldn't worry. Randall, although trusting Walpurgis, thought she needed more experience and that her heart was too soft. For that reason, he tried to comfort his friend by saying he understood that this was a trap for a mercenary, but he still wanted to help her. He also mentioned that mercenaries were useful in their own way. The friend perked up seeing his ability to make jokes even in the tensest moments. So, anyway, Randall declared he was feeling extremely optimistic, but Wahlberg didn't quite understand what he meant. The next day, Randall woke up mega early. He walked straight to the convent, heading to Margarita's room. This guy burst in abruptly, with a flare, and found her in the middle of a meal, nearly making Margarita choke. Randy Wu didn't want to wait any longer, and revealed he had a magical item he got from Felipe, but unfortunately he couldn't open it. This left the High Priestess super curious. Then he mentioned that if she could open the item, she would receive a reward on the spot. Without thinking twice, Margarita immediately agreed to open the item. A little later, our boy spotted a pair of gloves and asked Margarita what those gloves were for. Margarita explained that they were an improved version of the magic zipper. She finally managed to open a palm movement now. She could generate items whenever she wanted. After taking a step back, Randy admits he has never seen anything like this before, wondering if the game had some sort of update. He doesn't think this is bad at all, quite the opposite, but his thoughts are interrupted when he tries to drink some water. Out of nowhere, he asks his knight why he stopped walking. Then our boy realizes he has arrived in Plusen City, and that the place is on fire with a, crazy festival. After making his way through the crowd, Randy finally lets out a shout of joy. He feels as if he has been walking in Disney for 3 hours until he finally escapes the tide of people. And then, amidst the chaos, he notices someone holding a welcome sign, and our protagonist thinks that this place is exactly as he remembered. Andrew was there, full of cool ideas in his head, watching the excited crowd waiting for the arrival of someone named Great Rond. He thought Plusen was like a party where people mingled without caring about race, religion, or those things, you know? Then, that big guy, who was running after fame, was none other than the Demon King Kubalto. This Kubalto played an extremely important role in uniting the poor, showing a wisdom and charisma that left everyone in awe. He was considered the most humane demon king since Roland, and in fact, he was the piece that could save the current situation Randy found himself in. So, extremely determined, our boy knew he had to find Kubalto no matter the cost. Then, lost in reverie, a goblin approached him, all excited, and exclaimed that he felt the aura of a great adventurer. The goblin, 3 meters away, could already sense the strength emanating from Randy. Extremely curious, he decided to take a look at his system to better understand what the goblin was talking about, and to his surprise, he discovered he had 1 SS rank worthy of a leader, with 1 skill to boot. Until strangers were impressed, and with that in mind, Andrew declared that he wanted to meet Kubalto. The goblin was all excited and shouted, "Wow, how cool to know that the city will be graced by 2 powerful beings at once." He also mentioned that he had some business with Kubalto, and that he would take Randy to him. So, shortly after, they were already at the door of the Demon King's castle. The goblin asked Randy to wait and relax, having some tea in the reception room, while he went to announce his presence. Randy, on the other hand, found it bizarre that a goblin could gauge his level so easily, but he let it slide. In the middle of the room, he spotted a statue of the owner of the place, and, in a fleeting moment, thought, maybe I'll have to hunt this guy down soon. Moments later, the goblin returned and asked if the adventurer was enjoying the tea. Randy confirmed he was, but asked the goblin for a favor. "Next time you approach, please announce yourself first." Changing the subject, he asked how the goblin started serving Kubalto. The goblin replied, laughing, that their thing was a priceless love. As he pondered, Randy realized that in the whole city, everyone talked about Kubalto as the Great One, but that goblin treated him in an extremely casual way. Then, look at that, Randy noticed a ring on the goblin's finger and asked, "Wow, are you married?" The goblin laughed and ended up praising Randy's perception, saying that he had saved 10 years worth of money to buy that jewel. So Randy couldn't resist and said, "You're kidding me, right?" He pointed out that it took him until now to figure out the big theater. The guy pointed out that it was a ring from Kubalto, and Kubalto valued it a lot. The way the goblin behaved was so familiar that it only reinforced his suspicions. The big key, the goblin was the only one who didn't treat Kubalto in that extremely formal way. Realizing that the disguise was blown, Kubalto was forced to appear as he really is. He acknowledged it. "I know I am in the presence of the famous Valpurgis," with a dignified posture. He announced, "I am the law of the city of Pleasant." Then, he mentioned that Randy was probably there to study the mess involving Valpurgis. Randall confirmed that he was expecting to get some clues or valuable information about Kubalto. The Demon King said he was willing to help, but there was a catch. If Randall agreed, all his news would be solely for him. Randall could already imagine what Kubalto would come up within this little chat, so without beating around the bush, he asked what that condition was. Even before hearing it, he knew that the Demon King's thirst for knowledge was immense. In the end, he knew the past stories. Randy Wu had unique insights about the upcoming wars, and even about real estate speculations. He was eager to find out what Kubalto wanted, but everyone's surprise came. Kubalto just wanted Randil to be friends with Valo. That great Demon King explained that Valo had been in the spotlight after receiving the Raychecks and was getting close to the Empire's dashing paladin, which only fueled stories of a romance between Valo and Valpurgis. Kubalto wanted to connect with Valo because he knew that could be advantageous in the future. In response, Randall blurted out, "But why me, old man?" Then the Demon King handed him an item, a communication ring, explaining that this way they could talk from anywhere far away. However, Randall didn't think it was a good idea to befriend someone like Kubalto, right? No. But Kubalto said that in the name of true friendship, he would give all the information Valo needed. And to show he wasn't kidding, he revealed a crucial clue, something that was hidden in the capital of the Duchy of Saxony. Following the direction given by Kubalto, man, what a strange name. Kubalto, Randiu took the path to Dresden. Soon he encountered guards who tried to block his entry into the city, but our boy simply showed his system, leaving the Yao soldiers in panic at his presence. Andal warned that it was better not to try to get in his way. Once inside the city, he walked through the streets with the system interface wide open for everyone to see. People, noticing him, threw themselves to the ground, extremely terrified of any trouble. Andal thought to himself, it had never been so easy to achieve a goal. Soon enough, Randy arrived at the Merchant Guild. As soon as he entered, a woman shouted that the well-known crazy guy had arrived and that he seemed extremely dangerous. But Randy just walked in calmly, looking at the woman with his system interface. Facing the leader of the guild, the man shot out, "What is someone like you doing here?" With a calmness that only comes from being in control, Randy closed the system window and said, "I want to make a deal." The leader of the Merchant Guild, Kubalto, with his cunning demeanor, began to describe the situation in the city of Desrim to Randy. He mentioned that the old Merchant Guild and the Hitler Knight family were deeply in debt, a debtor and creditor relationship that seemed never-ending. Randy, who had no idea what was going on, was extremely surprised by the information. After all, this guy had always outmatched all his battles in knowledge over time, earning the title of King of Shadows for his vast network of information across the continent. Noticing Randy's curious expression, Kubalto saw that he was enjoying what he was hearing, but the Demon King had a wealth of information to share. Returning to the present, Randy found himself in the company of the leader of the Merchant Guild and Marceline. He introduced his daughter, Maran, who was now confined to bed and looked like a shadow of her former self. However, not long ago, Maran was a girl like any other, but over time she completely lost strength in her arms. The father described, distressed, that she couldn't even lift a fork, and soon the illness was spreading throughout the girl's entire body, despite having called the best doctors and specialists from outside the city. Nothing seemed to work. Her father, devastated, mourned his daughter's condition, but he didn't lose hope. Poor man, perhaps they could get help after all. He begged Randy Wu, the brave adventurer, to do something for her. First, Randy Wu asked the guild leader to call him Valor. From that moment on, he made it clear that he had sought an arrangement given Marin's critical situation. Valor realized that the girl was indeed in trouble, with significant muscle loss and an extremely malnourished body. He recognized that traditional medical methods weren't working, and fortunately knew a way to heal her. The girl's father, intrigued, asked what he needed to do to help her. Andiu mentioned that he needed an elixir from Glockner. With that, Marin's father made a face as if he had heard something absurd. He knew that this made the cure practically impossible. He was well aware of Glockner, located in the southeast of the Empire. Despite the beauty of the place, it was feared for the demonic dragon Charza, the grim icon of immeasurable power. Even the Demon Kings wouldn't dare provoke the creature, and the land was rife with beasts and demons, a deadly place not just for humans, but for anyone who dared to enter there. But as one might imagine, Randy was no ordinary human. He would ensure that he would go after the elixir on his own. This might have ignited a spark of hope in Valor's heart, but the girl's father still feared for Randy's chances. Then, in an extremely moving way, Randall added that what Marin truly needed at that moment was not the elixir, but her father's love. The man, touched, questioned why Randall was willing to help him. Then, our beautiful and brave Samaritan adventurer remembered the Haley family's debts to the guild, and, in exchange for help with Mari, wished for her father to forgive the debt. Valor was completely shocked by this, but his daughter's health weighed more and the chance of seeing her well again was more than enough for him to not refuse, right? He promised he would honor the agreement as soon as the girl was well. Sometime later, Angel arrived at Gloss Blockner, who was enjoying the view of the moon. The atmosphere was unique when he spotted some rare plants hitting the ground. These flowers could be the key to making unique medicines, so he ordered his horse not to touch those plants. The setting brought gold, and Gloss Glockner had guards at every corner, but Dill managed to convince them to let him pass alone, knowing that the grassland of that place was bathed in dragon mana and could serve for medicine. He realized that more than gold, the muck-covered soil there was pure treasure. So, without wasting time, he started harvesting everything that appeared before him like a medicinal potion, thinking about everything, healing the daughter of the guild leader, selling some items, and maybe saving others for the future to use in his own troubles. However, in the midst of all this work, an unexpected conversation happened. A stone hit his head and, to make matters worse, a goblin showed up and told him to leave. Now, this goblin was not alone. The goblin arrived with an army, claiming that that territory did not belong to humans. Under Randy Woo's eyes, the goblins began to work plowing the land. When he saw one of the goblins messing up the task, he couldn't hold back and started yelling at the guy. "Plow right, you bum!" he shot. "I don't want the roots of the plants damaged. If you keep this up, I'm sending you back to being soup." Irritation surged from Randy Woo's voice as he demanded that everyone understood his message well. These goblins even tried to attack, but the crazy guy used his skills to drain the blood from his enemies and resolved the issue in seconds. However, even dead, the goblins still had their usefulness. Using his abilities again, Randy brought the dead back to life and quickly formed an army of zombie goblins to help him. That way, he wouldn't have to exert himself so much, right? Not to take care of his plants alone. Now back in the present, Randy thought, "Kuraraki, you really shouldn't have attacked without a chance of winning, right? No?" Kuraraki humbly replied that the goblins hadn't recognized Randy Woo's true majesty. That guy was agonized by our Randy Woo accepting this bunch of slaves as servants. Randy let out a laugh, saying he was the one who should be grateful since the goblins were working tirelessly. Then he changed the subject and asked who else lived in this canyon besides the goblins. Quick as lightning, Kuraraki began to list. Here in this realm, besides the goblins, there are a bunch of other creatures. Werewolves, worms, huge centipedes, and many ogres. Randy Woo realized he had made a good choice having Kuraraki by his side. The guy had memorized everything. Kuraraki expressed his honor in serving Lord Randy Woo. Suddenly, a voice sounded from within Randy Woo's ring, and guess who it was? Cobalto. The guy came asking if he didn't remember that the ring served as a way to communicate. Randy Woo replied, "Oh, right. I completely forgot. What do you want to discuss?" The Demon King asked how things were in Gloss Glockner. Randall replied that the water was good, the breeze was fresh, and the place was beautiful. Wow. Cobalto commented that in the city of Poison there was great commotion, preparing for the next festival, and invited Randall to go if he had the time, of course. But what Cobalto really wanted to say was that Valpergos had recently visited Hitler. As Valpergos had predicted before, they demanded an outrageous settlement fee. Moreover, they threatened to confiscate the goods that were on their way to Holland. Look, to summarize, it was all one-sided and of an unprecedented injustice. Andiu made it clear that this had gone too far, but Cobalto warned that this was just the beginning. He really hoped Valpergos would act more sensibly, but Angelou was firm and would never accept such terms. He asked Cobalto to give them some time, and Cobalto agreed to grant the request. In the name of friendship, Andal promised to reward him for this favor when they met again. Balto seemed satisfied. After all, the Gloss Glockner was a gold mine, so he expected a really nice gift. Then, noticing a background noise, he said that Balto clearly had a lot of work ahead and that he wouldn't bother him anymore. Andal felt relieved when Balto finally hung up. After all, he was only enduring that conversation because of Valpergos. But just when he thought he could finally relax, Kuraraki came up to him and said, "Boss, we have a mess here, Randy Woo." Then, he noticed the arrival of several monsters. A pack of ogres had decided to welcome him. So, our protagonist ordered Kuraraki to fall back. He realized that the goblins he controlled had been massacred extremely quickly. And that wasn't all. Analyzing the ogres, he concluded that his blood absorption technique didn't work on them, and summoning the goblins again was out of the question. He had no chance against the ogres, so Randu realized he would have to get his own hands dirty. He assessed his magical abilities and summoned the Rublana, one of the 12 legendary swords of the Empire, also known as the unbreakable treasure of the Paltez house. The ogres changed their attitude as soon as they saw the blade. Andil declared, "They recognize my weapon, of course. The Blana, famous for illuminating the darkness." He even called Felipe a fool for having such a thing, and not knowing the power it held, but now, properly armed, he charged forward. After striking the first ogre, Andil tried to surround the others. He moved with such speed that the enemies could barely keep up with him. Not only did he strike accurately, but he also toyed with his opponents. And before the ogres could think about reacting, Randall took them all down without giving them a chance to counterattack. Later, he reflected that before the fight, he wasn't sure if he would be able to use his technique. But now, seeing the results, he quietly praised himself. And it wasn't just him. The new minion also found his performance something extremely incredible. Andy only stated that this was nowhere near what he could do at his peak, but then, moments later, he was caught off guard. A creature suddenly attacked him, demanding, "What are you thinking? What are you doing, kid?" Andal even asked where he had come from, but before he could think straight, the creature had already grabbed him. Annoyed, it snarled, "I'll break your neck!" Andal, who finally faced a worthy opponent, was tossed aside after receiving a punch. Randy felt that this was not just anyone. A blow had reduced his life by 10%. The opponent asked, "Are you strong? Who are you?" Little Randy replied, "First, introduce yourself, Chief." And with a wide grin, she remarked, "I am the master of Glost Glockner." Randy's eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. "My brother, the demon dragon." Things got serious. Just as Randy thought that the demon dragon was quite different from what he had imagined, she had the head of that classic dragon, but reality promised to be far more complicated. That enemy arrived with an evil vibe and stated, "There's something strange about you." She stood there analyzing Randy. His life force seemed to come from another dimension, right? But before she could pounce, Karaki, all protective, stood in front of Randy and shot, "I defend my master." Ignoring Karaki, the demon dragon cut in, "Enough of your arrogance. I'll finish you off now." But it wasn't that easy. "No, no," Randy pleaded. "Listen here, let me explain first." However, the enemy didn't want to talk. In this tense atmosphere, Randy dropped a bomb. "If I die, you're going down too." His audacity made the demon dragon stop in her tracks. "What is this talk?" she demanded, wanting some explanations. With an extremely suspicious look, Randy opened up and said, "Sometimes I have a very strange dream. Once I saw you, and it didn't stop there." He continued recounting that in the dream, the demon dragon had a rather tragic ending. "Every time I say that word, I remember that guy from Everybody Hates Chris. I just can't remember his name. Comment here what his name is." She might have thought the story was weak, but Randolph challenged. "If you don't believe me, tune into my own memories and see with your own eyes." The demon dragon extended her hand to touch his head and access his memories, but accidentally pinched him with her sharp claws. Then with a glimmer of curiosity, she said, "I'll try to see, but if you're lying, my brother, you're screwed." Soon, she retracted her claws and dove into Randolph's mind. But as soon as she started rummaging through his thoughts, a strange sensation hit her, like a punch in the stomach. There, in the whirlwind of ideas and questions, she got lost. Randy's voice echoed in her mind. She tried to ignore it and focus on what was more important, but guess what? Her curiosity pulled her to other places. Not only did she manage to see what she needed to see, but Randy Wu quickly projected the exact vision he wanted her to see. The demon dragon hesitated, more trapped inside, with not many options. A second later, she saw herself in her original dragon form. She realized with a shiver that Randy wasn't lying. That glimpse was enough to validate his story. After that, she abruptly withdrew from Randy's mind and sighed. Meanwhile, he thought, "Phew, that one almost saw more than she wanted, huh?" After a while, quite shaken, the demon dragon stammered, "Who has enough strength to kill me?" After a moment of silence, she let out, "I'll leave you to your own devices. You do what you want in those piles." "But hold on, man," Randy Wu interrupted, saying he wanted to make a small deal with her. After a moment of silence, he said, "But dude, your name is too long. From now on, I'll call you Yuve." The demon dragon, on the other hand, didn't like that idea at all. Andrew tried to calm her down. "Relax, you can survive, you know?" But she replied, huffing, as if she felt offended. "You little brat, I've been around for thousands of years." Yet he insisted, "Just listen to my proposal." "All right, keep it cool." Suddenly, the system beeped a notification to Randy. A new mission, gain the dragon's trust, high difficulty. Soon after, a snake crawled through the trees but was mercilessly crushed by a passing foot. Then, out of nowhere, this Odgarth appeared proclaiming, "I am the master of the abyss, deep and dark, face of chaos and disorder. My name is Ogdart, the demon king." But right after this big revelation, his servant quickly interrupted, "My lord, we're almost at our destination. We can't stop now or wear ourselves out." However, Odgart ignored the servant and continued, "I'm making my grand entrance. I will not tolerate interruptions." The servant quickly apologized, but the demon king waved dismissively, saying to let it go since he completely ruined his triumphant entry. In this whole vibe, a woman appeared with a cutting voice. "That servant belongs to me." Odgart, satisfied, laughed. "Ha, Caliona, you've arrived, my little girl." He even commented, "You see, as soon as this mission is a success, I will grant your greatest wish." Leone, however, tried to say she didn't need that, but just smiled. "As your father, it is my duty to do this." And he turned to the guys and said, "Ross Glockner is under the protection of a demonic dragon, but those beasts are not easy to face. Don't worry, what you have to do is devour everything that appears and crush anyone in your way." In the end, he let out a shout, "With me in command, victory is certain." And now, fired up with all this motivation, it was time to advance towards the goal. Meanwhile, going back to our protagonist, he gathered all his crew and instructed them that, even with the bizarre creatures and a hard-to-handle dragon, their mission was to collect as many valuable herbs as possible. And so, it was time to prepare the journey back to Dresden. Then, in a commanding voice, he ordered all the goblins to get back to work after this whole speech. Who could even cheer up the dead? Kurarake is preparing a mandrake drink for his master because the guy isn't joking around, right? While Randall takes a sip, he starts to think that running into a dragon in that corner would be a huge problem. If it weren't for the memories of past moves, he thinks that this situation seems strange, right? Not much stranger than usual, especially for Felipe, acting in such a different way. The image of the dragon won't leave his mind. Speaking of appearances, he's still feeling sappy about life with Valpurgos's face, which he finally showed him. Then he decides to do some research on the details, using his system. Andrew realizes that this isn't the first time he's seen a mess like this. Everything that's happened so far is different, meaning that what comes next could be as insane as possible, always. Almost all the maps of Gross Glockner, from every little stone to the last leaf. Then he thinks he's confused about the location of the dragons, drawing and why something feels off, right? The happenings in Raphaim, the fight with the Steel Elector and the betrayal of Frederick, the help from the Elector and the great crisis of the Valpurgos convent. Everything feels like it's happened before, but with different events. He can't quite understand what exactly is changing. It seems like he's forgetting something important. His concentration is broken by a commotion among the goblins, so he becomes extremely curious and tries to figure out what's going on. One of them comments that he only got hurt while picking some little plants. Andrew quickly gives a nudge reminding them to be careful, since some roots can be sinister, and he had already taught the right way to pull the herbs. After giving that downer, the guy tries to return to his daydreams, but then notices that an injured goblin has a brother, and in that moment, he remembers Charlotte and her sister, a piece of information only known in this round. Suddenly, the light bulb went off for Randy Wu. He gathered all the current round's events in his mind and realizes that his position has changed. His vision has changed too back then. He was a steel voter, the boss of an empire and the hero who united the world. A seriously powerful figure to match the title. But today, he is just a mercenary. Nothing compares to the characters he used to be. The only remnants of his past journeys are the flashes of his memories. But there's one little thing he does differently. He has a way of forming bonds with characters that were once mere NPCs. And thinking about that, he reflects that, man, knowing he saw Valpurgos's face was worth everything in the old game. Randy would have just paid off his debt to Valpurgos and moved on, oblivious to the circumstances. Now, in the midst of this reflection, he notices that things started to change since he crossed paths with Aquila, exactly when she presented the missing piece of the puzzle for him to discover the true ending of the story. A new mysterious space has emerged, and, along with it, a new character for Randy Wu. Now things are beginning to make sense, as if everything were undergoing a plot twist. Then, observing his master in motion, Karura asks if the drink is not pleasing the master. Well, at that moment when a loud bang shakes the place, Chubb appears shouting that everything Randy said was the purest truth, and he replies that all the credit goes to that demonic dragon who is lost and doesn't understand what's going on there. Randy continues to say that all of this has made the game even crazier than it already was. The cow, even though the shower hasn't caught a word of what he said, Randy claims he will show Aquila how to enjoy this world. From now on, he will do whatever he pleases because a new strategy is taking shape. And seeing this guy act like that leaves everyone around completely unsettled. Meanwhile, the Demon King Ogus is out there destroying everything around him, showing how tough he is. His army is in that vibe of cheering, glorifying the guy's power. Pretty solid, right? No. But out of nowhere, his daughter says she feels something in the air, and the demonic dragon Ogus appears asking the reason for that situation. Noticing the figures approaching, Old Garth laughs and says it's just a human and a goblin, but his daughter is not joking around and corrects him. No, they are not the only ones arriving. Soon, a colossal roar is heard, and Old Garth's eyes shine with excitement, because finally what he had been waiting for appears. Chuvi faces the Demon King and his entire army, demanding that he vacate his territory. Old Garth, who has been anticipating this for a long time, says he expected it. This guy also says he's there especially for her, so he begins to make a tempting offer, but Chuve doesn't waste any time and shoots back, immediately refusing. Hold on, I'll talk about the offer for you all soon. She glances at Randywu and gives the sign. She prepares to confront, challenging Oldgarth to attack the Demon King, realizing she had been speaking to herself this whole time. Her opponent hadn't even heard what he said. Then the Demon Dragon, like a true beast, charges at Oldgarth, leaving the rest to the plans of our protagonist, who anticipated Oldgarth's evasion. But the way things are going, it's happening sooner than in the previous move. He could let it go, but he knows the Demon Dragon will be useful later. He can't let this troop die here, right? Besides, the beauty of the continent, Lady Callione, is in his sights. What an honor to witness this, my friends. What an honor. So she removes her helmet and steps forward, leading her army. Seeing her act, Randywu realizes something crucial. Depending on the player's moves, Callione is the most risky character, potentially becoming both ally and enemy. But there's only one stronger courage, until Parmute, and she didn't earn the title of Ice Queen for nothing. The thing now is to ensure that she is part of our future plan, taking advantage of the situation. Where does it get to Callione and say, "Look, you're much prettier in person." Has a crush on her, huh? Sneaky. However, he finds a spear at his throat, a servant of Callione who threw an irony into the air. He walked without flinching, letting out a, "I'm just here to talk to the princess." "Cool, if you could make it easier, that would be awesome." The servant, already pissed off, had no patience and charged forward, worried about his master's safety. Then Kurura, the tough goblin of Randall, made a dramatic entrance thinking, "This goblin is the real deal, always keeping it cool." Beside me, Kurura faced the enemy and shouted, "You want to take on my master? Then you'll have to go through me first." Meanwhile, Randy didn't waste any time and taunted Calione, saying, "My goblin is way more loyal than yours." In the blink of an eye, a filthy whip ensnared his servant, leaving him with no escape. Out of nowhere, Rashak appeared, a vampire Randall had summoned, and he unleashed her to dish out the blows. But it didn't stop there, because Bifurem also joined the fray, entering to cause a ruckus. She let out the powerful, "If your intention was to take my master, it's time to prepare for the fall." Calione quickly realized that Randy had vampires under his control and was like, "Wow, what a strong guy." Beside Randy, a monstrous army was lined up, ready to join the chaos, primed for all that action. Calione noticed that her opponent's network of allies was insane, but she shot back, "Look how elegant, my team also has a legion of demons loyal to Lord Adras." With that, she shouted to her troops, "Let's go after the enemy, leaving not a single one alive." And thus, both sides prepared for an epic confrontation, Calione's servants advancing, while the masters also didn't hold back and started to clash and throw punches. Calione managed to push Randy Wu back and stated that not just anyone could block her attacks. In the end, she stands above anyone, even mute Andy. The ever-humble one said it was an honor to have his strength acknowledged, but quickly lamented that it was a shame she served Adras. He continued talking about how, if her true father knew this, he would be crying in pain. Randall now realized that she is none other than Lady Calione Remenia Kaimas, the daughter of the former Level 1 Demon Lord, Timas. Leon beside her asked, "So, what else do you want to know?" And where she couldn't hold it together, she started to laugh. And then, hilariously, you became the shadow of the one who once defeated you. Your old man, Calione, completely stunned, was like, "What are you talking about, man?" Randall shot back, "Calione, your father was the legend of the world, you know?" She always remembered that his warm gaze made her feel at peace. He was like a beacon for the rest of the demons. Calione had such admiration for the old man, but everything crumbled when he tried to mess with death. Timas was cut out of the story by the hands of Gora Calgon and Kaltos. After that blow, Odegas appeared to take care of her, and at the time, acted like a friend. He argued that he hated the other demons as much as she did. Lord Karmaris, according to Odegas, was not just a leader, but also his greatest buddy. He promised a fresh start, and that when the time was right, he would help her get revenge. But now Calione was furious, listening to Randy. Looking at her master, Randy told her to look at the item he had in his hands. Suddenly, he threw an energy sphere towards Calione. Meanwhile, Odegas was holding a demon dragon, thinking it was all a big soap opera. Tube, on the other hand, ended up accusing Odegas of harming Calione, but Odegas, with a brazen look, replied that it wasn't his fault, but the fault of those two over there. Subi, with sarcasm, didn't buy the story because he knew what really happened. Odegas called Subi persistent and thought about the moral that deep down, he had a weakness. He confessed that when they discovered their weaknesses, they would be ready for any fight and didn't know that Calione was there, listening to everything. The sphere Randy threw at Calione was, in fact, an image transmitter. Now, with the truth revealed, Calione was in shock. Ever since she lost her father, Oldgast had become her protector. In life, Andal realized that the plan was going as he expected. He had set everything up with his loyal servant. The magic projector had come from her, and she asked Subi to use it in the fight. That he wanted her to hear the old guard's confession in real time. Sub didn't understand why, but Randall insisted it was crucial for the scheme he had in mind. Leon was now turning the ideas in her head, stopping her struggles and thinking about everything she had heard. Where she noticed that Chibi had done his part, it worked for the plan. Now the rest of the story was in his hands. With tears in her eyes, Calione preferred to believe that all this time had been a performance by the old guard. She recalled that when she was little, the old guard had always been by her side. And in that atmosphere, Rexy sent the message saying that his job was coming to an end, and Randall just told her to keep to herself and maintain her position. With her morale at an all-time low, Calione realized she had spent 50 years obeying her true enemy. The weight of that revelation completely devastated her, but instead of crying, Randall had a clever idea about what to do. Why doesn't she use all I? This anger and frustration to take revenge, right? That's when he decided to teach her the right of the true name, Taimar. What would Leone do with that recognition? That was entirely up to her. Breathless, Leone said, astonished, "I haven't heard that in a long time." It was a spell that invoked the vast power of the cosmos, strong enough to hurt even an archdemon. The same spell that made her father, the great demon lord. Only she quickly added that only her father knew all the secrets about it. Then she wondered how this stranger knew about it. At that moment, Randall realized he had read everything about the subject. Thanks to the guide he had studied, he knew Cain inside and out. The the destructive power of his true name and even his fatal weakness. That's why he needed to tell Calione the story he had heard. He explained that he had devoured the chronicles of the 7 demonic wars, which detailed the method to deal with the archdemon. Among those strategies was the rite of the true name of Cain, which could be a very useful trump card. Calione nodded, agreeing that it made sense. Randall was thrilled by this, but then she let out, what couldn't help him take down Odagast because the guy was immortal, right? He remembered that before becoming her father's subordinate, Old Cash took a direct hit from that same spell and ended up in a critical situation for a long time. But even so, her father couldn't finish him off. He walked away, didn't take it lying down, and began to speak. You are very mistaken about this, my dear. He pointed out that her buddies were inside her army, and no matter how strong she was, it was impossible for Calione to deal with everyone alone. And that's when he positioned himself as her new ally. Will you follow me? He asked, or are you going to kick the bucket here? Calione, all emotional, recalled that when she was a child, she told her father that she wanted to be a great demon lord like him. Her father warned that if she was serious, she would have to become much stronger than him, and then little Calione asked if that was possible. Her father, full of faith, said yes, and believed in her because she was his daughter. The scene shifts back to now, and Calione with tears in her eyes asks, can I defeat Odagaste? Randy was confused by the question, finding it strange that she was crying. Her partners were also surprised, but Pifei Han realized that in demonic years, Calione was only a child. Now, Kurura was wondering if the master had forgotten about their other problem. Nearby, Odagaste was still fighting against the rain, and even facing such a strong rival, he didn't seem tired or nervous. He declared that he was disappointed and expected more from my opponent. Shubi, in turn, completely ignored the provocations and prepared to continue the fight. Odagaste's role was to distract the enemy, but he became frustrated when Shubi avoided direct combat. Moreover, his enemy wanted her to accept his own proposal instead of joining him. Shubi countered Odagaste with her incredible dragon breath, but despite the heavy blows, she didn't take him down easily. Odagaste was stronger than expected. He not only managed to defend himself, but also charged forward, feeling confident. You want to fight? Then let's go. All right. Then she lunged at the sub with insane speed, knocking her to the ground with a single blow. The sub vowed revenge, and she transformed into her full glory as a dragon, attacking Old Guard in her complete form. The impact of the strike was so strong that it caused an earthquake. Meanwhile, Randy sent a warning. Kururaki, watch out for the stomps. Hanax, seeing the intent, thought all of this was very cute. The goblin was like a pet to Randall. Griffin. Ryan approached the master and noticed that the sub's mana was increasing. She was even breaking the polyfoam. He observed, but was still wondering if the sub's law could really handle this enemy. Randall began to say that the battles of Gloss Glockner were a huge burden for the guy, and out of nowhere, an idea sparkled in his head. He called Calione, informing her that he had an extremely important mission for her. Are you up for the challenge? Without thinking twice, she replied, yes, of course. Meanwhile, Ogus was getting caught up in the mess against Chuvero and tried to attack, but he didn't let up. He was even bragging, but soon Juby unleashed her flame breath. But Ogus seemed to defend himself with such absurd skill. Sensing this, she identified the attacks and finally managed to deliver a powerful blow that caused considerable damage. But Ogus didn't let it shake him and said that it was nothing to take him down. He started asking for more action to quench his thirst for fighting. That was when the sub called him arrogant, saying she wasn't even using her full strength. If I were using my full power, a planetary collapse would be nothing compared to what I can do. She's acting like Ozaru or the monkey from Dragon Ball, it must be. Digart stands firm and says he has tricks up his sleeve too. Then, with a fierce strike from his axe, he knocks the chub down, throwing her through the air and leaving the landscape in tatters. After that, Oldgar jokes. Who would have thought a demonic dragon would be so mediocre? He admits he never thought it would be so easy to finish her off after that devastating strike. Chuve regressed to his weakest form. Oldgar approached and discovered his weakness, a shower. You are trapped in this place. I'm curious to know why, but instead of answering, Chuverso just scorns his rival. Old Gash says, look how stubborn you are, but now your time has come. However, before Old Gash could advance on Chuve, Randall appeared, stopping everything with a precise attack. Chuve let out a sigh of relief upon seeing him. You finally made it, but you're late, you know? Randy sarcastically replied, wow, you're terrible at this comment. It's not going to make Chuver happy. Old Gash stands up, finding Randy and asks where Calione is. Randy simply says, oh, don't worry, you'll find out quickly, kid. Then, he points up, and Calione descends from the skies, questioning Old Gash. Wasn't there something you needed to tell me? Old Gash confirms that she has finally mastered the rite of the true name. He orders her to use magic against Randy, but he has already heard. Enough. He provokes Calione to give him quick information about his father's killer, but Old Gash insists he knows nothing, claiming Gamar was his best friend and would never harm him. The rain advances, confronting the enemy with truth. She reveals that everything everything old Gash said had already been relayed, so the scoundrel already knows all the facts. With that, old Gash has now lost it, shouting that his enemies conspired against him. Andrew orders Shuni to restrain old Gash before he escapes. Junior uses his territorial skills to bind the enemy with strong roots. Additionally, a magical seal shines around him. Old Gash, calm as ever, says they could all attack him together if they wanted. Calione, the first to strike, unleashes her magic against her former ally. With a heart burning with hatred, she pours all her fury into the attack. The code withstands the impact of the magic, and afterward, Calione feels exhausted from all the power spent on that last blow. The enemy, on the other hand, is in a much worse state after absorbing all that force from the strike. Remembering her father, Calione is once again overwhelmed with emotion, but she doesn't even have time to lament. The enemy is already there, surprising her. Randy Wu decides to attack, not wanting Calione to be the target of hateful insults. On the other hand, he hates being hurt by a human, but that anger didn't help much. After grabbing the enemy's attention, Randy Wu uses his own horn or gasset as a weapon against him. He states that this technique is the only way to animate an immortal, using part of the target's own body. With this precise, trailblazing strike, he finally takes down the enemy. Immediately, Randy Wu's system alerts him about the rewards he earns from the victory. Meanwhile, Shubi begins her healing spell on Calione. She warns that she nearly didn't survive from using so much mana in her attack, but at least the enemy is defeated, right? With everything settled, Calione has no idea what to do with her own life, but one invites her to join their group. At that moment, Calione realizes she has finally found a place where she belongs. Soon, Marina, the guild leader's daughter, wakes up. She complains that the medicine is incredibly bitter, but her father insists she must drink it anyway. Well, it seems that Lord Valor and his crew risked their lives to bring this from afar, and Marina asks if, after taking it all, her father would consider her wish. Her father replies that yes. On the other hand, Randy Wu questions their agreement, but the guild leader says it's better to discuss business where his daughter can't hear, right? No? But delving deeper, Andal asks the guild leader about the debt situation. The leader responds that the strong opposition from the debtors is causing all this commotion. He explains that it's probably because of the Saxon elector. The elector had already met with the guild master, stating that the debtors were VIP clients, so he wouldn't agree to the deal, right? He also mentioned that the guilds had been allies for a long time, so it would be best to arrange a meeting with the Saxon elector. He promised that he could resolve this. Randy realizes that they are agitated because they fear losing their connections. From the merchants with Saxony, if the debt is settled, for Randy, it's no surprise that Lichter's bastards are going crazy. If it were a confrontation between the Emperor and the House of Barian, it would be an even match. Putting the Saxon electors in the middle of this only complicates things further. The guy realizes that Valporgos is on edge, and of course wants to ease the tension somehow. So, the merchant suggests that we try another scheme to get out of this mess. But Randy, pressured, shoots straight. So, are you really good at negotiation? In a noble property similar to a castle, the nobleman raises an eyebrow upon receiving the news that Saxony is ready to take action against them. He laments, if my family had seen the chance with the debt, they would have already extended the deadline, but now we don't even have that. The messenger, already a bit irritated, states that on their part, the situation is beyond repair. Then the noble takes action and orders the servant to go directly to the capital, almost clutching at the emperor's mantle if necessary. He is determined to resolve this mess at any cost and return with everything in order. Shortly after, Randy Wu's system makes a noise notifying him that his skill to summon the dead has leveled up. Now he can call his allies at any time. How delightful. To test this new power, he decides to summon Pinferin, and, well, she appears there in broad daylight, calm. Then Anju, all excited, comments that now she and the vampires have truly become Urnwalkers. So Randy sends a special mission. He pulls a document out of his sleeve and tells her to deliver it to the said Ribosaltes. He emphasizes that this paper is crucial, so he asks her to be careful when delivering it. Afterwards, the guildmaster appears and informs him that everything Lord Valo asked him to do is ready. He shows off a spectacular carriage, made by a baiter, saying that only a few nobles have this kind of luxury, and he managed to acquire it through a client connection. He also includes the payment for herbs and some money for the trip, putting the amount down happily. But you can't help but wonder what you plan to do with such a fancy ride. Well, Andre answers, all serious. Maybe I'll use it to pick apart the heads of those who are in trouble. Just as we agree on this, Maria shows up to say goodbye, right? Randy advises her that although she's better, she still needs to take some time. Randy and everyone there are shocked by this chill attitude, and she says, "This is my thank you gift." After the heartfelt goodbyes, Maria and her father head home. On the way, Maria gives her father a stern reminder of his promise of a wish, and then she declares, "My wish is to become Lord Valor's bride." She mentions how enchanted she was with him as soon as they met, but her father is all upset about this change of plans. Meanwhile, Randy Wu and his group continue their journey. Calione comments that Mari is indeed a warrior, and is surprised at how she tried to win over Randall with such a bold move, but she adds that Lord Valor seems to value money more than anything else. Randall retorts, "You guys aren't getting it. This is how the world works. Everything revolves around money." But seeing the disapproving looks from Calione's nuns, Randall gets defensive. Then, to give some relief, his system buzzes with a message from Cobalto, who learned that Valor is back from Gloss Glockner and doing well. Angua confirms everything is fine, and that his mission is going smoothly. Balto asks if the enemies have made their move. His crows spotted there, exit quickly, which is why he's calling. Cobalto replies that apparently things are flowing as Valor predicted, meaning the enemies have already stopped to capitalize this morning, looking super irritated. Our boy Randy Wu admits that the trouble is partly his fault and gives a wink for more surprises to come. Cobalto adds that the pink demoness, Holland, is in the capital. Then, Randall asks him to spread a rumor in the capital. Cobalto jokes, "Wow, this guy is getting more meticulous by the day, huh?" Randall responds that their alliance is indeed for that. Cobalt responds by ensuring an extremely good reward, but I decided to end the call. Randall said they don't need to be so embarrassed, I'm just trusting you. Now he's going to disconnect after the conversation. Randall immediately realized when he said something somewhat embarrassing. Leonie, on her part, was taken aback seeing Randall talking to Cobalt, realizing that his connections are much wider than she thought. Speaking of which, Randall comes up with an idea. Leonie, embarrassed, asks, "Why, are you looking at me like that?" And Randall calmly just states that she needs to do something for the good of the team, right? Sometime later, in Vienna, the capital of the empire, people are walking through the streets discussing new rumors. It seems that the Kaiser's daughter is making an appearance in the city, and the gossip that Audigus killed her father only to end up dying by his hands is also circulating. Then, the rumors started saying that Kaiser's little girl unleashed the family's secret technique upon the enemy. That's not all. People are saying that her beauty is so absurd, it could get anyone a subscription on OnlyFans. Wow, man. Amidst all this chatter, the carriage of our boy Randall arrives, and everyone quickly assumes it's the daughter of the Kaiser. Caliuna, all embarrassed, asks Randall, "Is all of this really necessary?" And he asserts, "Of course it is." Randall insists that her face is a strategic weapon, man, but Caliuna retorts that for her, the weapon is just the sword and the axe. However, Randall, with that serious look, warns, "Someone who looks that good shouldn't talk nonsense." Then she, with the sincerity of someone who doesn't like being the center of attention, confesses that she feels really bad with so many people staring. Then Randall shows up and gives the tip. It's simple. Rest one hand on your cheek and the other on your knees and strike a pose, and everything will be all right. Irritation takes hold of Callie. "Ronnie, you know I'm the commander, right? I'm usually in armor, not a dress." And she responds desperately, "What you're asking me will ruin my whole reputation." But Randall remains calm. He's playing with her. "You have all the freedom in the world, my dear, but if you want to stay here, you'll have to play the game my way." Cornered, Calione couldn't escape and ended up striking the poses he suggested. But with all that commanding flair, she decided to really turn on the charm, pulling the prettiest expression she could muster. And when the crowd saw it, they were just blown away, their jaws dropping. Calione, despite feeling incredibly embarrassed, held her pose firm. Soon, the men of the town began to acclaim her beauty. They had never seen such an intense reception, and she was in shock. In the meantime, Roland was preparing his team. Excited, she remarked that she was expecting a very important visit and regretted that it wasn't taking place in her Rose Palace because this person was more vital than the Emperor. To this end, she called everyone to prepare the best meal they had ever made in their lives. Roland also ordered that everything be arranged, making it even more beautiful than the Rose Palace. One of the attendants rushed in, announcing that the visitor was almost there, and Holland, feeling anxious, said everyone needed to give their all. "This is the most important day of my life," he exclaimed, full of enthusiasm while thinking to himself, "I'm doing all this for my Lord Kemus." Her beauty and voice were such that any man would be fascinated. This only fueled the envy of the demons. But her truth was much more intricate. With a sharp smile, she wielded diplomacy as a weapon, strengthening Rosaline. Thus, she became known as Rosalind's bride. But behind the crown, there were deep secrets. One day, Roland approached Kaiser and said he was the only person she could open her heart to. She believed her heart would never change and begged him to accept it. But before everything could unfold, little Calione interrupted and asked who that beautiful woman was. Caesar replied simply, "She's a colleague." Then Calione gave Roland a gift, a cookie she had made with her uncle. "Odiga, how are you so beautiful? I want to give you the best cookies." The girl said it was at that moment that Holly understood that Kaisar's heart already belonged to another. Then, she picked up the Calione and asked if she could one day request her to choose a name for a castle. It would be an honor if you chose a name. The princess suggested something wonderful, inspired by the beauty of Roland. She suggested, how about the Palace of Roses? Roland loved that name and promised to build a fantastic castle. Returning to the present, Roland and Calione finally met since Lord Kamar was no longer in the picture. Roland began to feel the need to see his only blood relative, his daughter. She knelt in a very fancy way in front of Carleone, who was utterly enchanted by the way she was received. Roland sighed and said, if we were at the Palace of Roses, we could offer a much more splendid meal. However, Carleone assured him that what they had was more than enough. Roland also thanked the Lord, mentioning the value of bringing the princess back, whom everyone thought was dead. She said that value always surpasses difficulties in curious ways. Roland even commented on their strange connections, but Randy quickly changed the subject. He sighed, feeling the weight of the moment. Love stories are always good, right? But if you insist, let's talk business. And that's when Randy delivered Felipe's message, the steel elector. Roland felt relieved, thinking Felipe was alive, and soon asked, can I see him in person? But Randy and another just shook their heads. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. Randy, firm in the situation, stated that Felipe was not in a condition to receive visitors at that time. Randy started to grasp the gravity of the situation and replied, so let's get straight to the point. And just like that, the guy sends Felipe's message. He can't do anything publicly at the moment, so he appointed Ted as his general procurator and asked for Roland's help to recover the Paltes in the very near future. Roland thought, even if I have to send a little lie, I need to gain Roland's trust. She has to be my ally, with Margarita tangled in the curse of the one who crouches in the grave. This is also the case with Pedro Simo receiving support from a great lord alone. The protagonist concludes that Margarita won't be able to handle this alone, so he needs to recruit Roland. She would be the key piece to gaining luck. I can simply eliminate someone who is under the blessings of the great lord. Recruiting Roland is the key to everything. Along with her, the candidate can place the mutfish in his place. Randy finishes conveying Philip's message. Roland heard the focused message but soon released, just that I have a request to make. She says that Lord Valor must already be aware of her situation, implying that she was referring to a blockage they are experiencing. Roland sends word that Lord Valor truly represented His Highness, the Emperor. You can't ignore what I say. Where? No worries. Calm her down. Don't worry. It'll all work out. I've already set the tables. Meanwhile, back at the Imperial Palace, a distressed servant calls for help, but the Emperor only gives a resounding no. Emperor Franco IV didn't even bother to hide the piles of gold around the throne. He says, I'm sorry. When I heard the circumstances, my heart softened. But the servant insists that there needs to be some order for his situation. The Emperor is confident, and even asserting that the debt is under control. They were quite nice to bring a tribute to the Empire, right? And on top of that, he notices that the old merchant guild is providing support to the debtors. The servant in charge of convincing the Emperor not to finalize this deal is completely at a loss, knowing he will have to return and admit he failed. At this moment, an Imperial soldier appears. Lord Valor has arrived, Your Majesty, and the Emperor, excited, gives him the go-ahead to enter. Upon entering the palace, the protagonist makes that honorable gesture, introducing himself as Valister Valor. He says he is at the service of the Empire. An operator cuts in, saying, I was waiting for you, but he ignores this guy. He is just a messenger, but the protagonist asked him to have a word only with the Emperor. The Emperor, somewhat reluctantly, agrees to what, right? The noble's messenger is quickly expelled from the palace, but instead of leaving gracefully, he ends up begging the Emperor to be a little more flexible. The situation doesn't work out, and to make matters worse, while the guy is being dragged out, the protagonist is having a good laugh. That whole scene left the young man even more furious with indignation. Then, a little way from the capital at the castle of Old Gast, a group of demons defeated in the conflict recounts their troubles. Old Guard's daughter, who is furious to the max, is not kidding around. She remembers that she asked to go with them and comments, if I had been there, I would have done much better than Calione. With her anger rising, a servant appears bringing hot gossip, but she is so upset that she doesn't even notice. Hey ma'am, the Emperor just imposed a blockade on our region. Now she's furious, but she can't understand what that means. After all, she doesn't know much about diplomacy. An extremely worried servant is more lost than a blind man in a shootout. But what does that actually mean? She asks this guy, impatiently. Back with our boy, he is finally alone with the Emperor. Randall can't help but think about the glories and achievements that the capital boasts. He almost feels like an intruder. But the Emperor cuts in. Let's skip the formalities, my boy. The Emperor, impressed that Valo came with Kaimar's daughter and changed the negative perception of demons in important regions, sees this as an advantage for himself. He thinks that Valo is there for a reason and wants to know what it is. but he sees Valo as a rat in the mouth of a convinced lion and won't be outdone by a newcomer. So he asks, "What do you really want?" And then, humbly as always, our boy suggests that Holland's economic blockade be transferred to the dominion of the Demon King Old Ghost. The Emperor, curious, asks, what will he gain from that? Since a simple friendship agreement with the Kingdom of Roses doesn't seem to be enough. He still scratches the Roland, not even on my radar, but the protagonist insists, "I will do everything that your majesty asks." And then, with the motion, he shows a document to the Emperor, and right away it seems to intrigue him. The document states that Holland himself committed to paying 10,000 florins annually. So, it's not just that. The Emperor commands, is there any way to prove that this document is genuine? With that extremely skeptical look. So Randy, confidently, usually gives an explanation that impresses. Look, Odgash has become the most hated villain in the continent. If you block the Demon King, you'll be celebrated worldwide, my friend. The Emperor, who was keeping to himself, admits that Calione is an intriguing scheme, but still claims that it won't happen. In the end, that alone doesn't justify all this, because politics isn't driven by feelings, right? At that moment, Valor, with his head boiling with anger, thinks, come on, what was he? Defending when Rosalind was blocked because of Holland's refusal to pay up? But he doesn't stop there. He continues, Randall, look, everyone lost steam after they died in the recent Great War, and the rest of the crew is gearing up for a fresh war against the Demon Dragon. The seeds of conflict are still rolling and everyone in the city is in panic, so he concludes that it's crucial to make a decision soon. The Emperor gives a compliment. Ah, Valor, this guy knows how to use words, doesn't he? He can convince me of anything. But internally, Randy Wu laughs because he knows that this gift is more of a joke than a truth, right? Lacking any persuasive skills that shine in other areas, he just wants to return the monarch's attention with a small display of loyalty. But this infuriates the Emperor, my friend. The Emperor isn't falling for that. Who is trying to deceive me with this smooth talk? And then he immediately demands that Valor test the patience of the guy who runs the whole operation there. Thus, the Emperor calls the guards and gives the order, take Valor away from my sight. And then, our protagonist didn't understand a thing, banging his head and thinking, what's going on here, my young man? Right after, at a party over at Roland Calione, he's feeling out of the loop, watching people stuff themselves with food. And on top of that, the Emperor is there laughing like there's no tomorrow, saying he's never had a conversation as cool as this one with Lord Valor. Randy Wu himself doesn't get this sudden turn of the Emperor, and suddenly the Emperor says he can now call him Uncle, forgetting the formal titles. Randy Wu, in a sinister move, responds by calling him Uncle too, my operator, laughing and saying it sounds lovely, way prettier to his ears, right? Meanwhile, outside, the servant who got kicked out of the palace is boiling with rage, watching the Emperor joke around with Valor. The guy is fuming, thinking that this cozy little spot should be his, right? He can't believe how Randall pulled this off, how he managed to get this while he couldn't. This guy doesn't understand anything. Then, further along, one of the guys with him asks why they didn't kidnap Valpergos. Then, a figure in a cloak appears, warning that the situation is tense, suggesting they might want to rethink their strategies. But the leader of the sinister plan responds immediately that there's no turning back. If they don't do what needs to be done now, his family is doomed, so he insists on precision, but with caution. Meanwhile, our brave Randall ends up retreating to his room, completely exhausted. The scoundrel, with that humor, lets slip. What do you think is going to happen when you drink? All the drinks offered to you? Randall tries to justify, oh man, stop being a drag, this is socializing, remembering that he used to handle 7 rounds back in the day, but now he just wants some time to rest. But then it's too late. Kubalto calls right away and lays it out. Dude, it went bad. They didn't leave a like on the video. Man, I'm disappointed in you, bro. Andy, dying from a headache, tries to hang up, but Kubalto yells, now's not the time for jokes. And about Valpergos? Then, he warns, telling Randy to take the matter seriously. At that very moment, there at the castle of Oldgis, the daughter of the Demon King, Solta, who no longer has time to hesitate, wants to avenge her father. From now on, the girl is Margaret, who is determined and swears that she will devour even the dragon itself if necessary. She orders everyone to prepare for war, commanding intensive training until everyone is active as soon as possible. The goal is to head to Glossglockner. Her servant, with his head in the right place, tries to lift morale, telling her not to act recklessly. The Emperor already has a warning of economic blockade, and Valpergos even brought St. Margaret back. Moreover, the blockade in Holland has been lifted, so Roland won't stay silent either, which will only worsen their situation. But none of this shakes Margaret, who stands her ground, insisting that nothing will stop her from moving forward. Meanwhile, Valpergos finds herself in an insane situation, imprisoned and screaming, "Why are you doing this?" The conspirator among the captors reveals the truth. Our plan is to persuade the contractor, and he boasts about the Fortress of Places. It's there, it's like an iron castle. Even if people try to attack, it will be hard to take it down. And thus the conversation ends, while Valpergos, casually mocking, calls the guy an idiot for thinking that the normal gates will protect them. The enemy, furious, says, "Shut up, girl! You're saying too much for a hostage!" Just waiting for that idiot Valnor, huh? The memory of the humiliation Valnor caused only makes the guy more irritated. Then Valpergos shoots back, "Get ready for an even greater humiliation when I escape." The tension only rises. "My boy, you can't do anything in your current state." The opponent bluntly states, "I noticed you're alone in this, huh?" But then the situation heats up, and another accomplice appears screaming that there's an invasion going on outside. Isn't it that Randy's people are coming together? The whole place thinks they're in the game. The units are all in E position, except for Peferum, who is out on a special mission. We can attack now if needed. Ururak, out of nowhere, asks if he can join the action. Total silence. Everyone keeps to themselves. Randall sets the mission. It's clear to rescue Valpergos and take down Hitler. They've crossed every possible line and continue to push forward. I might have let it slide if they stayed out of my way, but now I will pursue them to the last drop. With that, the gang heads for the invasion. Randall tells Richake to send the green from this side while you take the other path. Kururak, desperate, pleads to go with Randywu, but Richake shows up and says, "Honestly, let's go together, just us two." Randywu orders Kururak to follow Richake and help her, but Kururak is not enjoying any of this. He is afraid of Richake. Randy, nervous, snaps, "Brother, we can't waste time with a coward, we need to act fast." Inside the cell, the captors are keeping an eye on what's happening outside, but the main conspirator is furious to see Randy. He's itching for revenge and grabs a weapon, muttering, "Just thinking about what I'm going to do to you already gives me satisfaction." Then, with that, he rushes angrily towards his target. The leader of Hitler's team shouts for the others not to let the guy go into battle alone. Meanwhile, Valpergos quickly realizes that Andrew is there to save her. She thinks, "This guy never abandons me," but is also filled with rage at being so powerless. Valpergos begins to tremble with fury, causing the pillar she is tied to start cracking. On the other side, Hitler is having thoughts. Everything was going well until that servant interrupted. He stops and thinks, "Why didn't I go to the capital?" Suddenly, a strange noise startles him. Isn't it that Bruno's condense managed to escape? He is upset about how the paladin managed to break the barrier, but thinks that without the sword, she won't handle the pressure. So he believes he can attack fearlessly. However, little does he know he is about to be surprised. Valpergos not only counterattacks, but charges forward and shatters his sword. Hitler is anxious, but insists he won't lose this one. To his arrogance, he takes a brutal right hook and loses a tooth, my brother. Valpergos states firmly, "I can't depend on others forever. I will take down the enemy myself." Hitler tries to justify himself, but he's so tangled up that all he can say is, "That wasn't in my plans." Valpergos simply responds that he doesn't care about that, but before he can attack, Hitler jumps in and shouts, "Monster!" Valpergos fires back, "It's very ugly to call a lady a monster, isn't it?" Suddenly, she sees something approaching. A real monster is coming. Hitler bursts out laughing. "Finally, my monster has awakened. Now, a true monster will face another." The guy summoned the brute Igor to protect him. Meanwhile, over with Randywu, he wonders, "Am I on the right path? Is he?" Cobalt replies, "Yes. I'm observing through the crowd, and someone named Igor is out there too. This guy is the human weapon they are developing." Cobalt explains that Igor is the same one who caused the massacre at Hitler's castle, a true killing machine. Randy furrows his brow and says, "That wasn't in the game plans, right?" At that moment, a voice yells, "Steady valor." Randy thanks for the information but says he needs to head back to resolve the situation. The conspirator from the Hitler family shows up and growls, "I will have my revenge." However, he realizes he's in the line of fire. Suddenly, a shadow summoned by Randy falls on him and knocks the crazy guy out. While Randy complains that it's a waste of time, he needs to rush back to deal with Igor. He charges at Valpergos, who moves like a shadow and dodges all of his attacks. Then Valpergos, with a look that says, "She's not joking," gets real and drops a heavy subject. "So, Igor, you hit me and brought this annoying situation, right?" The tension rises, but she stands firm. "I'm from the convent of Valpurga, so you'd better be careful because I won't slack off and I won't hesitate to kill you." The intensity of the conflict rises as Igor, looking like he's been reprimanded, is angrier than before. Valpergos wonders what's going on with him this time, seizing the opportunity to show off, and tells everyone, she's not worth it. The paladin was too unfortunate with her words. Igor hates all of this Valpurga convent, Setdor, too, and now Condensa is screwed. Igor starts shouting. Now the mission just escalated to become a bit more difficult for Condensa. Then, in a flashback, Margarete Fantoche is throwing a fit over food, complaining that the camp is awful. Her servant, trying to explain the situation, says that the finances are fine, but they need to rescue Lord Vontade to improve things, right? After all, the situation is so tight that they even had to sell the castle due to the economic blockade. Margaret asks about the army, and the servant says they received a partial payment and that they are taking care of the doctors. But she retorts, all self-righteous, that they should be lining up for training instead of loafing around. Despite the servant's insistence on their health, he blames her father for spoiling everyone, and the servant, in the middle of the stress, comments that things used to be calmer with Lord Odger around. Then, Margaret, already demanding, tells him to bring a real piece of meat. The story then flashes back to a young Igor trying to enter the convent of Valpurga. One of the nuns, looking at him, thought, this boy can hardly lift a weight. He had great desire but no strength, so he was barred because, it was a convent that only accepted girls. Time passed, and Igor still carried that resentment. Back to the present, he lunges at Valpurga, enraged because she has touched on his weak spot, the trauma of his childhood. Hitler also starts laughing, mocking. No one can hold Igor back when he is in this total fury. But guess what? Hitler himself ends up becoming a target when he mentions the convent. Valpurga doesn't understand all this obsession of his with the convent, but she sees that his blow comes laden with sadness. She realizes that she can't keep dodging forever, so she begins her counterattack, striking her fists directly against his. Igor feels the force of the attack, and this only fuels his fury, reminding him of his past, the nuns, words echoing in his mind when he decided he would train to get stronger. But the crew didn't realize that the pressure from the training made his hair simply disappear. And look, could this be the new One Punch Man? A scar remained, but he also got totally ripped. Valpurga tries to strike her opponent's stomach, but it doesn't even tickle. Then she throws a straight punch to his face, finding a weak spot. After knocking Igor to the ground, she confidently says, when your maximum power is gone, I want to have this duel again. But suddenly, the place starts, shaking. Valpurga wonders if she overdid it. On the other hand, our boy Randy also feels the vibrations, unsure if it's an earthquake. In the blink of an eye, the ceiling of Zarba's castle nearly crushes him, but the kid is quick and uses his magic sword to cut the stones before they hit. However, all the heavy debris that fell destroyed a good part of the castle. Now Randy's path is blocked, but he doesn't have time to just hang around, right? At that moment, Kublato calls and informs him that Valpurga is okay, but the situation where she is isn't great. He sends the bat to create Randy-Woo, telling him to run and rescue his friend before it's too late. Valpurga, a bit anxious, thinks Randy must be on his way and needs to find him soon, because she had some things to tell him. But as she finishes her thought, a piece of stone almost hits her little head. However, our hero shows up, cutting through everything in his path. Her joy is instant upon reuniting with Randy-Woo. Even in this extremely crazy situation, Randy-Woo is equally happy, but soon notices Igor is down. She asks who he is, but before they could clarify things, the bat Kublato interrupts and insists that they don't have time to waste. The place is going to collapse. So, the two of them take off. When Valpurga is surprised by Randy's agility, he reveals that even in distress, he couldn't leave Igor behind. As they fled, he told the guy he had something important to say. Randy, being practical, suggests that the time to talk would be when they were safe, but the Countess insisted on what she had to say. Then, with a serious look, she reveals, actually, my name is not Valpurga, but Chardier. Andal found the name beautiful, but soon he realizes that the situation is tense and they might not escape. Now I'm confused. Should I call her Valpurga or Chardier? Wow, Valpurga noticed too, but soon she is hit by the debris that collapsed. Andal kind of tries to help, but he ends up getting caught as well. The bat was worried, but Andal announces, hold on, I'm not dead yet. In the end, even though the ceiling is falling, he barely manages to save himself. And then Valpurga also realizes, and they glanced around to see that everything was calm. I think that's enough. And Randil, all excited, says that her arrival was a show. He tries to use her wings to fly and grab Valpurga's hand. Chardier warns that the castle is going to collapse in a countdown of 5 seconds. Randil struggles, but Valpurga has trouble grabbing his hand. And then, when least expected, the castle falls, raising a massive cloud of dust. Insane. But hey, the good news is that everyone managed to escape. In the end, when they discovered her real name, the connection between them became even stronger. She was all radiant, with a smile that lit up her face, while bright hearts swirled around her as if they were dancing in the wind. With her bat wings, she flew through the dust storm, pulling him by the wrist, while a group of relatives dragged his cloak as if it were banners. Down below, the fortress was in terrible condition, exuding rubble. He looked up during the flight and remarked sarcastically that he would hardly escape, teaching that in the blink of an eye everyone would be crushed. He adjusted to the air current and replied that he was glad to have arrived before it all ended. Jacques placed a hand on his cap, letting the bells on the ribbon ring, and said that his lord was calling her. She raised her hand in greeting, but a furious voice thundered like a storm, calling her name. The fright was so immense that he exclaimed that the voice belonged to Margaret Abadeza. She realized that those crazed worms dared to kidnap Valpurga. Controlling her breath, she confirmed that she was already on her way to settle the score with those bastards. He murmured again that she wanted to go after them and give them a beating, and Margaret eagerly confirmed that this was indeed her intention. On the ground, the soldiers stretched their necks as she hovered before the ruined castle. Raising both arms, she proclaimed that all should witness the secret technique of the convent of Valpurga, invoking her title as the Great Margarita. The light began to shine intensely. She roared the name of the technique, supernova. A pillar of light, white as the sun, plummeted down, lifting all the dust, bodies, and stones, rising from the smoking crater like a golden glow escaping from her hair. She laughed, claiming that she was unbeatable. Watching everything from the sky, he swallowed hard, thinking he would have to be careful not to provoke her for some time. Night transformed into a new morning in the administrative heart of Netherby, in Ladsroot, where the villainous of Valpurga reflected in a dull blue pool. Margarita and Valor met on the porch. The wheels of the carriages did not stop as men armed with dark blue cloaks descended and organized themselves in line. Margaret whispered that the guest had arrived. She realized it was yet another dramatic presentation as Valor observed the heavy armor of those soldiers and stammered that they were stronger than those worn by the Emperor's elites. Footsteps echoed on the carpet as a tall, blonde nobleman advanced over the banners. A caption announced that he was Maximilian, Elector Prince of Bavaria. Valpurgis, with her hair flowing loose, ran out of the line and threw herself into his arms, asking if he was okay and calling him uncle. He stepped back, examined her face, and with concern, asked if she had hurt herself. The guy was extremely worried. She, all flustered, said she was fine, adding that she was safe thanks to Valor. His gaze slid to Salvador. His voice warmed as he said that Valor, or whatever the name was, should simply vanish with the title it suggests, right? Valor Vapor. She stiffened at his acidic tone, and a drop of sweat slid down her cheek as Valor questioned this sudden shift. Margarita fired off that, without Valor, they would be in real trouble. She emphasized that Valpurgis was here only because Valor had arrived quickly. The prince, moving towards Valor, mumbled that if he hadn't shown up after that pest, that boy, but suddenly he fell silent, mentioning that the kid must be too lucky. Valor now let out a subtle chuckle, thinking that with all those men at his back, the prince wouldn't make it to the fortress. Then, all of a sudden, the prince stretched out his arms as if to make a bombastic announcement and, in a loud shout, warned that this Valpurgis would spend the night with her uncle. The girl was in shock, shouting back, trying to escape that situation. But meanwhile, Margarita, completely alarmed, screamed, and the prince had to calm down and stay sensible. Valor observed the scene and thought that Valpurgis's childhood must have been a real nightmare. The ceremony continued as the trumpets tuned their notes in a tone of majesty. The prince calmly announced that Valor is of Valor, for his deeds and merits now will be a knight and must be loyal to Purgis, with limitless loyalty. He respectfully bowed to the scene and accepted the honorable title with gratitude. Then, as he walked through the corridors of the cathedral, thoughts swirled in Valor's mind. He reflected that despite the sullen air of the Elector Prince, he was grateful today, and that could not be denied, as the rescue was a great feat. He realized that Hitler's debt had turned into a deed of land, and he notices some tense expressions on the faces of certain courtiers watching the award ceremony in a nearby hall. Valor projects the image of the Emperor before those who have rebelled. The Emperor then slams his hand down and demands to know if those who have adapted have the courage to disregard their brother. Valor realizes the Emperor is right. Life revolves around money and power, and he is there to teach a valuable lesson. Inside, he laughs at finding the situation adorably ridiculous. When he finally stumbles to his room, he throws himself onto the bed exclaiming that his day has been a marathon. He remembers that Hitler, who tormented Valpurga, has vanished and is now a knight indeed. And on top of that, he owns a small piece of land. His thoughts drift to the image of a blonde girl, and he reflects that even though he has seen her in various races, everything about her now seems fresh and new. The door to the room is flung open with a loud thud, and in walks the blue-haired princess named Callion, filled with fury. He says her name, the sheep, as she points, accusing him, trembling her lips, asking how he had the audacity to leave her behind, that very guy who told her to follow, and then just disappeared. She keeps asking him what she is supposed to do. Then, Valor, like a true ninja, appears, addressing Princess Callion, suggesting she take some time to breathe better, right? And when she is ready, it's best she challenges him again later, right? No. The princess blinks in intrigue and asks if composing means some kind of strength training. He says no. She comments that, under Old Guard's guidance, she has already trained enough. Roland gestures with his hand and explains that he is referring to a different kind of emotional balance. Soon after, the princess turns red and begins to calm down. A moment later, she decides to leave, right? But before that, she orders Valor to respond when called, and Roland exits, laughing joyfully. Valor rubs his temple thinking about what he just heard. He murmurs that Roland saved him. A calm voice comments that going to the capital without explaining anything to anyone It would leave anyone startled, the act of yawning suggesting that they were now wanting to sleep, and when their name is softly called, it's as if they are floating at the counter. He turns around and is surprised to see Chautier surrounded by roses, her gloved hands on her waist, her gaze sparkling like stars. She was immersed among petals, tilting her head and beckoning him to walk by her side. Surprised, the guy felt the heat rise to his face and responded that he should be going soon. They walked over the glow of the waxing moon, a fairy tale setting. He tried to dust off his sleeves and remarked that the day had been utter chaos. She kept pace and agreed that it truly had been. After all, the nocturnal insects sang, and the atmosphere was quite tranquil. She threw a sly glance and mentioned that Valpurgis was just a nickname. She explained that, technically, that was her birth name, and that the festival of the goddess Valpurgis also bore that name. The nocturnal insects sang, and the atmosphere remained calm. He nodded, now better understanding the connection. I guess that's why it sounded like the goddess of compassion, right? Internally, he recited the deities of this world as if he were memorizing a poem. He mentioned Rujin as the god of justice, Valpurga as the goddess of compassion, Orbiana, ruler of nature, or Marga, the light, and Akala, the sovereign of time and space. Following Valpurga's commandments, feeling bold, he commented that Zautir was an extremely lovely name. She looked at him with such surprise, but he thought the name truly suited her, right? Then, he began to step a little closer. She whispered that he could use that name when they were alone. He clenched his fists at his sides, acknowledging that it was a name meant to be used only in private. An inner smile emerged as he thought that with this vibe, a real kiss might even happen. Out of nowhere, a column of red flames burst forth with a loud bang right in front of them. He quickly turned around, taking a protective stance over Zautir. With her body extremely tense, the red-horned dragoness landed hard in the steaming crater, her eyes shining like glowing coal, and she shot out that courage was with her now, while he could only murmur how miserable the situation was. The fierce voice was none other than Margareta's. She shouted for everyone to gather. After all, demonic beings were emerging from the dark bushes and advancing towards the clearing. Margareta, with her hands on her hips, cast a sharp glance at the awkward assembly. She yelled aloud why everyone was in their underwear, and questioned why they were in their underwear. One of the guys stood up and said that he was out of money. Margareta reminded him that they had sold the castle, and he chimed in to mention that the payments were overdue due to the economic blockade. Margareta interrupted, hand in the air, demanding that they do something. Straightening her shoulders, she raised her thumb above her shoulder, determining the next step. She began to speak that the destination now was the lair of the demonic dragon Gloss Glockner. Then, with a wide smile and shining teeth, she raised a clenched fist and proclaimed that they should fear nothing and devour anything that moved. Then, with all her strength, she shouted that the demonic dragon was hers. That's it, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you really liked the video, leave a like, subscribe, share, and comment here. Man, it takes a lot of work to narrate this video, but I believe you like it. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.